I was the quiet brother, until my brother put me by the trash after I paid for his party. So I left the bill unpaid, told her fiancé everything. I'm Lucas. I'm 36 now. I've always been the most dependable of all my siblings. Never the top selection. Never the troublemaker. Never the one praised. Just the person who arrived on time, paid his own way, and remembered everyone's birthdays. I have a job in finance. I live by myself and avoid drama. My relatives are loud, extremely attached in a phony way, and professionals at pretending everything is wonderful while avoiding actual problems. I was constantly present but never genuinely welcomed. The type of individual invited to weddings but not included in group shots. When we were kids, my brother, Jason, was treated like a celebrity. He was daring, thoughtless, and always doing something risky. He always turned out okay. This arrogant assurance. My parents adored it. Even after he dropped out of college, lost job after job, and returned to their house at the age of 30, they still referred to him as a genius. Meanwhile, I worked my way through university, stayed in the same job for nearly a decade, and even helped cover their mortgage payments when Dad's work hours were decreased. However, none of this appeared to be significant. It never gave me a significant role in the household. I pretended it didn't upset me, at least that is what I told myself. I remained silent, continued to give money, answered their calls, returned home for the holidays, and smiled through the small barbs disguised as jokes. Lucas, why are you so tense? It's just a get-together. Oh, we figured you were working. You always are. I let it go. Some part of me hoped that if I kept showing up, they'd eventually treat me like I belonged, rather than the person behind the scenes footing the money. That fantasy fell apart last October. It all began with dinner. Jason had recently proposed to Lauren, whom my mother immediately adored and referred to as an angel. My parents had planned a large supper at a posh rooftop restaurant in the city, far beyond their typical budget, which I now know should have been my warning. Mom called me a few weeks ago. Lucas, sweetheart, she whispered in that charming tone she employs when she wants help. We'd really love it if you came to Jason and Lauren's engagement celebration. It's going to be such a wonderful evening, I replied without hesitation. Just let me know the time and place. Her tone softened. Also, if you don't mind, could you cover the booking just to lock it in? We'll pay you back soon. I should have realized then that we'll pay you back meant I'd be covering it indefinitely. But, as always, I agreed. I phoned the facility, reserved a private location for 20 guests, and paid the deposit using my credit card. I didn't feel bitter. It was Jason's big moment, and I was hoping to truly feel included this time. On the night of the meal, I arrived at precisely 7 p.m. I dressed in a dark blue suit, pressed shirt, cufflinks I had saved for months, and carried a fine champagne bottle as a gift. I even created a personalized card with their initials on it. When I reached the rooftop, the woman in front nodded and directed me to the private portion. I paused, took a breath, and then stepped in. The place looked fantastic. Tiny lights above, flower arrangements on each table, and mellow jazz playing close. Everyone had already arrived: my parents, Jason, Lauren, her family, and their close friends. They were laughing, having beverages, and conversing. I strolled over with a smile, expecting for a friendly greeting. Jason turned and gave me the same arrogant expression. "Oh hey," he remarked casually, without even looking at the bottle in my hand. "Glad you showed up." Then he pointed to a foldable chair wedged beside a trash can. "Not many seats left, sorry. This table is for family," he said, seeming to be sorry. "But you've got a spot over there." I literally froze. I assumed he was being sarcastic. I turned and looked at Mom. She simply returned a faint, closed-mouth smile, the one she uses when she decides to remain silent. My father produced an unpleasant laugh and raised his drink. Lauren didn't lift her head, and a few others chuckled in unison. I stood still for a second too long. I intended to say something, but nothing came out of my mouth. My ears burnt. It reminded me of when I was 13 and was left out of a family photo during my cousin's wedding because I didn't fit in. I went to the spare chair, set the champagne down on the floor, and sat by myself. My coat stayed on. A server approached me and inquired if I was a part of the event. I nodded without saying anything. He said nothing else, simply handed me a water glass and started walking. I sat calmly for almost 2 hours while everybody laughed, gave speeches, and exchanged gifts. I listened as my brother spoke for quite some time about how fortunate he was to be surrounded by individuals he cared about the most. Lauren referred to my mother as the best mother-in-law anyone could ask for, and I observed my mother become upset. Nobody even asked whether I wanted to place a dinner order. Dessert eventually arrived. A magnificent tiered cake adorned with glittering gold decorations. Soft music was played. The sun has set behind the skyline. I noticed no one had looked my way in half an hour. Then came the bill. I observed the waiter approach their table, bearing a leather case. He hesitated, examined the room, and then looked at the payment details. My credit card, I remembered. The waiter stepped up to me. "Pardon me, sir," he asked politely. "The total charge comes to $4,860. Would you like us to process the final amount on the same card?" Everyone turned their heads. Jason raised his brow. "Oh, right," he replied casually. "Lucas is covering it." The server stared at me straight. I smiled slowly and quietly. My voice did not shake. "I'm not with that group," I clarified, making sure everyone could hear. They told me this section was reserved for relatives only. The entire room became silent. The air felt fractured. Jason's jaw dropped slightly open. Mom appeared puzzled. Dad sat upright. Lauren's father narrowed his eyes. The server appeared unsure. "But sir, you're the one who placed the booking." "I am," I said with a nod. "And I paid the deposit, but I wasn't seated with them. I was off on the side." I grabbed my coat, and looked at the garbage can beside the chair where they had seated me. You could almost hear everyone's mouths drop at once. Nobody moved. The waitress stood between the tables, holding the bill as if it were a bomb. Jason was astonished, as if someone had hit him with something icy. My mother's look shifted between me and the check, as if she couldn't believe how quickly things had gone bad. "Lucas, hold on," she urged in a quiet, uncertain tone. "What are you doing?" I lifted a shoulder. "Just sticking to the seating plan." Jason said the main table was for family only, so I assumed I didn't count. I turned to face the waiter. "I didn't eat. I didn't have anything to drink. I wasn't included, so I'm not footing the bill." "Don't be stupid," Jason exclaimed. His phony grin shifted into something sharper. "It was a joke. You always act like it's life or death." The entire place had become silent. Even the jazz band had slowed to a faint, uncomfortable hum. All eyes were fixed on me, and for once, I didn't cower. "That's the issue," I responded softly. "You all think it's funny. As long as someone else is the punchline." Lauren was disoriented, as if she had suddenly understood something important was happening. Her father, who had been quiet the entire night and was rigid in his blazer, stared at Jason. "You invited him to your engagement dinner and sat him near the garbage," he said, surprised. Jason scoffed and looked to our mother for encouragement. She straightened up and mustered a grin. "Let's not make this a big deal. Lucas has always had a flair for drama." I nearly laughed. That was her favorite excuse. He is dramatic. He is weary. He takes things the wrong way. Any reason to avoid the truth, that what they tolerated was cruel, and they stood by while it occurred. The server cleared his throat. "Apologies again, but the restaurant needs to close out the event. If we can't use the original card, we'll need another method of payment." There were no voices heard. I turned and approached the elevator doors. My father eventually decided to talk. "Lucas, seriously, you already handled part of the cost. Might as well take care of the rest." I froze in place. That phrase shattered something within me. I gently turned around. "You're right, Dad. I did handle the initial payment. I contacted 3 different venues before choosing one with a rooftop like Jason requested. I arranged the date so it wouldn't clash with his football calendar. I selected real floral designs because Mom said fake ones would ruin the photos. I paid the $1,000 non-returnable fee. I didn't even hesitate. I came dressed properly, arrived alone, and showed up for my brother. I came forward, my voice quiet but clear. And what did I get back? A collapsible chair next to trash bins, and a group of relatives who clearly don't see me as one of them. I faced Jason immediately. "So now it's your turn to handle it. You and your actual family." Jason's skin went scarlet and spread up his neck. He stood up straight, attempting to appear scary, but it simply made him look foolish. "You're being dramatic." "No," I said calmly. "I'm setting limits." I turned and left. I bypassed the elevator and descended the steps. Each step was filled with amazement and racing adrenaline. I had accomplished something I had only dreamt possible. Outside, the crisp breeze hit my face like a cold slap. I untied the knot in my tie and resumed walking. I didn't have a destination. I only knew I wouldn't turn back. I assumed that was the conclusion. A brave exit. Perhaps a few awkward apologies thereafter. Perhaps someone is trying to smooth things over. But I didn't anticipate how profound the influence of that moment would be. Later that night, long after I had returned home, still dressed in my formal attire and cradling the unused bottle of champagne like a lifeless limb, my phone lit up. The first message came from Jason. "Bro? Really? Couldn't you have just paid, and then talked?" Then one from Mom. "You made us appear horrible in front of Lauren's relatives. Was this vengeance?" Following that, an unidentified phone called. It was Lauren. "Hey," she said, her voice softer than I had ever heard. "I know we don't speak much, but can I ask something?" "Go ahead," I said cautiously. "Did you actually pay for everything? The down payment, the flowers, everything?" I halted. "Yes." There was silence on the other end. "Because they told my dad you volunteered, that it was your idea." That halted me in my tracks. I didn't offer, I stated honestly. They requested help. I agreed. I wasn't trying to impress anyone, and I wasn't expecting repayment. But I absolutely didn't come up with the idea. She breathed out a sigh. "Well, my dad is furious. He thought you did it as a nice gesture, but now he's saying he wouldn't have approved the restaurant if he knew the person covering the cost got seated beside garbage." I said nothing. "He said Jason and your parents made him look ridiculous." Another pause. "I'm not trying to get pulled into this," she immediately said. "I just thought you deserved to know." I thanked her and ended the call. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few days, the situation deteriorated more faster than I anticipated, and certainly not in the direction my family expected. It all started with the family group thread. The biggest one. The chat that only buzzes during holidays and birthdays, loaded with low-quality food photos, recycled greeting memes, and cheerful Friday greetings from Aunt Ashley. That thread had been entirely quiet since dinner. It suddenly came to life. "Mom. Lucas, we need to talk. Call me. Jason, you ruined things. For Lauren's family. You have to fix it. Dad. This has become ridiculous. Please apologize so that we can end this." I didn't respond because this wasn't about folding chairs. It was not about the dinner bill. Before all of that, I was treated as the go-to contact, the person who drove people about, the spare wallet. And now that I'd finally said no, they weren't sure how to react. Lauren's father exacerbated the situation, or improved it, depending on your perspective. He definitely did not tolerate public shame. According to a mutual link, Jason's friend Brian, who always treated me better than the rest, Mr. Whitman completely lost it the night after that supper. He funded Lauren's elite education, provided her with the resources to launch her advertising company, and reportedly went above and beyond to organize a refined, seamless engagement timeline, only to discover that the groom's relatives fabricated the payment story, degraded their own kin, and forced him to split the liquor expense after I refused to handle the rest. According to Brian, Lauren's father made a comment at breakfast the next morning that read something like, "If they disrespect their own flesh like this, what happens once you legally join them?" Brutal. Jason was crushed by the aftermath. All wedding planning froze instantly. Lauren withdrew to her apartment for clarity, and her wedding planning boards vanished from the internet. My mother, attempting to resolve the matter, sent a thorough email, not a brief note, not a phone call, a formal communication. The headline was just, "Please." The message content consisted of 5 lengthy lines full of sweetness and emotional bait. She stated she never meant to inflict grief, that she didn't realize I felt alone, and that it would be extremely beneficial to the family if I could meet with Jason and speak things through. However, the term apologize never appeared. Only lines like, "We didn't catch on. You got it twisted. Don't throw away all we've built over one night." I reread that last statement for a long time. What did we build? Was she alluding to the fact that I drove for 3 hours on December 24th to give presents since Jason, according to her, wasn't mentally prepared to shop? Or when I canceled my international vacation to Spain because Dad needed surgery and they couldn't afford a caregiver? Or the part where I didn't hesitate to co-sign the paperwork for their second vehicle, the same one Jason borrowed and never returned? I did not type an answer. I did not open the draft again. 2 days later, my mother's sister, Aunt Karen, called me. That stunned me. She was never warm or excessively nice, but she was direct. She managed a home design company and maintained a cool, professional demeanor. We hadn't spoken in over 12 months. Lucas, she answered. I found out what happened during the dinner. Obviously, I answered with a faint snark. I'm not calling to blame you, she explained right away. Actually, I'm glad. It was overdue. Someone had to speak up. That threw me off balance. She exhaled. I understand how your parents operate, constantly hiding things beneath the surface, pretending perfection, but they've leaned on you far too long. And Jason, he's always acted like you're just background noise. Thanks, I replied softly. But why now? Because the Whitman family is now involved, she replied bluntly. And your mom is in full panic. She rang me yesterday and begged me to convince you to back down. I raised an eyebrow. And how did you respond? I told her you didn't require a lecture, you needed distance, and maybe it's time they figure out how to stand up without using you as support beams. That was the first time in my life that a family member genuinely acknowledged me. Not as a source of income or a safety net, but as a person. That night I got a message from Jason. Jason. Bro, Lauren's father just canceled the venue deposit. Said, we have different principles. You need to correct this. Help me out. Me. No. You deal with it. That was the light bulb moment. He still did not understand. He still saw me as a resource, a fallback, a living payment method. So I made my selection. I would fix something, but not what he was anticipating. That night, I opened a shared bank profile I had created around a year earlier, when Jason was unemployed and requested for assistance. He never turned it off. His streaming and fitness memberships remained connected. I deposited the remainder, roughly a couple $1,000s, to a private savings account I had established. It was a small sum, but it belonged to me. Money I hadn't touched in almost a year because I felt obligated to leave it there. Then I contacted the bank and properly closed the joint account. Jason tried to call me 4 times in a row the next morning. When I eventually responded, his voice was frantic. What the hell did you just pull? I did not respond. Bro, I had dinner plans with Lauren tonight. We were going to that restaurant she really likes, and now my card's getting declined. It says the account is gone. I'm aware, I replied. I shut it down. You did what? You can't just... I can, I responded evenly. And I already did. You made it clear I'm not part of the family, remember? So, if I don't belong at the table, you don't get to touch my money. He paused and then changed his tone. Dude, come on. This is petty. You're upset. Just admit it. You've always hated that people notice me more. You're just mad because Lauren's father sided with me. I chuckled. A real laugh. Oh, Jason, you honestly believe he's on your team? No response. Then I continued. Don't worry, you'll figure something out. You always manage to ask mom to get another card in your name or let Lauren's dad teach you what being responsible looks like. And then I ended the call. I had no idea what Jason did after that, but a few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was not from him. Lauren sent a message. Email subject. Line. We should probably chat. I looked at the title for a while before opening it. The remark, we should probably talk, felt like the prelude to something serious. I wasn't sure I was prepared for it, but curiosity and a desire for clarity compelled me to read it. It was longer than I anticipated, courteous, but profoundly personal. Structured like a formal letter, yet with emotion running through each sentence. She continued by stating that she now realizes how horrific that night was, and that she had not observed how terribly I was treated until things imploded. I was too focused on making everything picture perfect, she informed me, that I missed what was actually happening around me. She said that her father was outraged, not only because of the financial lies, but also because of the disrespect. He told me, if they can humiliate someone who gave their time, support, and money for the night, then I seriously need to rethink the family I'm marrying into. Lauren didn't hold back. She wrote that Jason tried to downplay everything, calling it a minor misunderstanding, but once her father received a copy of the full invoice from the restaurant manager, the truth began to emerge. Jason had informed her that I volunteered to cover the bills, that I preferred to sit alone since I was bashful, and that I had departed due to a work emergency. However, Lauren visited the restaurant herself. Yes, she confirmed that. And after chatting directly with the waiter, the whole tale unraveled. Then came the line that struck the hardest. I called off the engagement last night. I froze. She explained that it wasn't just about the dinner, The incident revealed a pattern of behavior she had previously overlooked. Jason's arrogance, dismissive attitude toward her, and how he talked behind my back. He kept telling me I was making too big a deal out of it, she said. But the truth is, you were the only one who showed any decency. She concluded with this. I'm not contacting you to bash Jason or drag you into drama. I just wanted you to know that I understand now and regret not realizing it sooner. I sat still, reading it several times. Not because I doubted it, but because I wasn't used to people believing my side. The family group chat went silent for several weeks. Jason called twice more, but I ignored both, and he gave up trying. Lauren returned the engagement ring, and her father formally canceled the venue and contacted all of the vendors. I learned from others that he had returned to her parents' home. Some of Jason's friends also vanished, and it appears that a few remained only to take advantage of his connection to Lauren's network. I assumed that was the conclusion, that everything would fade into silence. But then, one calm Sunday morning, someone knocked on my door. It was my mother. She stood outside on the porch, wrapped in a loose cardigan and holding a plastic container of lasagna as a symbolic gesture. Her eyes were swollen, and her makeup was barely applied. I didn't say anything. I simply unlocked the door slightly and waited. I made food for you, she mumbled. I did not take it. I want to have a conversation, she told me. No justifying. No blaming. That caught me off guard, and I stepped aside to let her in. She sat at the kitchen table, just like she did when I was younger. Her fingers twitched nervously, and she forced a smile, but there were no defensive lines this time. You're exhausted. He didn't mean it. She cleared her throat. I need to apologize. I crossed my arms. For only that. Her expression stiffened, but she gave a brief nod. You're correct. Probably for more than one reason. She took a breath. I didn't want to watch it. It wasn't invisible. I just chose to ignore it. Jason has always made a lot of noise. He captures everyone's attention. You've never complained. You simply handled whatever came your way. You were reliable. We started treating you like a solid object that we never expected to shatter. Do you know what the problem is with safety nets? I said. People only notice them after they collapse. Not while they are climbing. Her lower lip quivered slightly as she glanced at her hands. Your father and I were incorrect. We let Jason do whatever he pleased. We let him treat you as if you didn't matter. I didn't respond. I cannot reverse everything. And I know that bringing food and apologizing will not erase the years we went without noticing. But I needed you to hear it. I finally get it. And I regret it. I gazed at her for a while. And for once, she wasn't explaining it away. She wasn't covering for Jason. She wasn't telling me to move on or get over it. She was just acknowledging it. I nodded slowly. Thanks. We didn't say much after that. She left the meal. I accompanied her to the doorway. She didn't mention Jason. She didn't ask me to reach out. She just said, take care, and drove away. Things didn't repair right away, but they also didn't break apart. My parents began sending individual texts rather than group ones. They were quick and courteous. Later, my mother invited me to Thanksgiving. Only if you're comfortable, she wrote. I have not replied yet. According to what I've learned, Jason works part-time at a job he dislikes, lives rent-free, and probably avoids looking in mirrors. He hasn't phoned since, which is good with me. I started reading about emotional independence, family patterns, and inner quiet, and I finally took that postponed trip to Spain. I also invested in new headphones with active noise cancellation. I also started going to therapy, not because I was damaged, but because I recognized that healing does not require apologies. It begins when you look at yourself and think, you were worthy of more, so you gave it to yourself. No, I did not pay the bill that night. But I was eventually able to collect the sum that I had been owing for years. And for the first time, I'm not sitting close to the trash. I have taken my own seat. My sister faked abuse to scam $3,000, framed my brother, and sent me a threat by mail. I shared the proof, and the whole family took my side. I am the oldest of 7 children, 4 siblings, because my mother continued having them until she got her dream daughter. My brothers and I have always been close, but it had nothing to do with our interests or schoolwork. Number 8 was a trauma link. You know, we understood early on that our parents didn't care about us. When one of us spilled something or requested a second plate of food, They always said the same thing. Why couldn't you have been born a girl? They used to whisper it under their breath, but once Samantha was born, they dropped the civility because it was evident that she was the kid they had always desired. She knocked my youngest brother Ryan off the couch on the first day she came home from the hospital as a newborn baby out of jealousy. Completely normal. And I expected my folks to just make sure Ryan was okay, so I was shocked when they came over and laughed at him. "Wow, Samantha, you are so smart," my father said, as if her violence was somehow lovely. "Yes, do it again," my mother shouted, before laying them both on the couch and asking Samantha to knock him off again. And as I attempted to wrap my arms around Ryan to protect him from the sorrow I knew so well, they mocked me. Ryan then began to resemble my son rather than my brother. Because even though my other two brothers were equally despised, I knew they had each other and would be fine. But Ryan only had me, so I never caved in to the brainwashing of admiring Samantha as if she were a celebrity. I never thought it was appropriate to forget about Ryan, to ignore his birthdays, to let him cry alone in his room at the age of 6, to toughen him up. And despite being just 5 years older than him, I had a lot of wisdom to share. I taught him to be a hard worker who values focus and discipline over unnecessary high school drama. He matured into an academic weapon, so I wasn't surprised when he graduated as valedictorian of his class. Meanwhile, Samantha, who was also in his grade, graduated with a 1.2 GPA, 4 ex-boyfriends, and little to show for her efforts other than a good Snapchat score. But at their graduation, I was the only one who cheered for Ryan. Meanwhile, when Samantha appeared on stage, my parents yelled so loudly that I thought their lungs would collapse. My parents insisted on fully paying Samantha's community college tuition, telling Ryan that he would have to pay every penny. Samantha was now a spoiled, entitled brat. So when she heard this news, she simply smirked and remarked, "It's about time he learned to do something by himself for once." It was brutally evident that the real world would eat her alive. And of course I was correct. 2 months later, Samantha called me. I sensed something was wrong because she was very polite to me without asking for anything. "Samantha, what's going on?" I questioned. My tone was irritated and slightly nasty. She informed me that my parents had given her walking money for the full year till May of college. This amounted to $50,000. My heart dropped. I spent the entire thing, and now I have nothing. Can you help me? I immediately hung up. These were the same parents that forbade me from showering more than twice a week to save money. The same parents that wouldn't let any of my brothers eat more than one serving of food at supper. I assumed we were broke. But I did not blame Samantha. Instead, I blamed my parents, who are grown-ups. They were the reason Samantha is Samantha. But things didn't end there since Samantha used my rejection as an excuse to launch a personal vendetta against me. 2 days later, I discovered that my whole bank account had been drained in a single transfer. I was sitting in my modest apartment when I noticed it, the one I had worked so hard to afford. I'd just returned home from a double shift, my feet throbbing in my worn work shoes. I kicked them off and sank on my second-hand couch, bringing out my phone to see whether my paycheck had cleared yet. That's when I noticed it. I stared at my phone screen, blinking quickly to ensure I wasn't seeing anything. My account balance was $0. My hand shook so badly that I dropped my phone onto my lap. This cannot be happening. I had just over $3,400 in there. My rent money, grocery money, and the modest emergency fund I'd been saving. All gone. The room seems to revolve around me. The $3,400 reflected numerous early mornings, late evenings, skipped lunches, and declined social invites. Every dollar had been gained through hard work and determination, which were the same principles I had instilled in Ryan. Now it had vanished in an instant. I called my bank right away, my voice shaking as I described the scenario to the customer care representative. She placed me on hold to review the transaction information. Those 5 minutes of waiting felt like 5 hours, and my stomach tightened with each passing second. The hold music played in my ear, a pleasant song that seemed like a cruel joke against the backdrop of my panic. I paced my little living room, the worn carpet rubbing across my bare feet. 3 steps forward, 3 steps back. My apartment's restricted space now feels like a cage. My thoughts raced through the possibilities. A bank problem, identity theft, or a mistake I had made. But deep down, I already knew. When she eventually returned, her tone was professional and sympathetic as she verified my worst concerns. A single wire transfer was made yesterday afternoon to a First National Bank account, which was authorized using my online banking credentials. The customer support representative's voice faded in and out while explaining the details. Transaction time was 2:17 p.m. Confirmation code sent to your email. Successfully authenticated. Each word drove another nail into the coffin of my financial security. I looked at my calendar on the wall. Yesterday, at 2:17 p.m., I was in a team meeting at work, my phone hidden away in my desk drawer, fully ignorant that my financial life was being ripped apart. I insisted I hadn't authorized anything, saying that I was at work at the time. The agent promised me that they would initiate a fraud inquiry, but warned that it could take up to 10 business days to complete. 10 business days. I mentally estimated my upcoming bills, rent in a week, utilities 3 days later, not to mention groceries and gas. The small digital clock on my microwave appeared to mock me, with each passing minute pushing me closer to financial catastrophe. I thanked the agent in a hollow voice and closed the call. My phone vibrated with a text message just as I finished the call. It was Samantha. No message, just a snapshot of her relaxing by a hotel pool with a fruity drink in hand. The caption reads, "College life is stressful. Needed a break." Samantha was photographed wearing luxury sunglasses, her well-manicured nails wrapped around a glass with a miniature umbrella. Behind her was a beautiful blue pool surrounded by palm trees, a far cry from the community college campus where she was meant to be battling with academics. The sunlight reflected off what appeared to be a fresh gold bracelet on her wrist. My money. My hard-earned money was now on her wrist, paying her poolside vacation. My blood heated as I glanced at the image, and the link was suddenly evident. She was mocking me, showing off what she'd done with my money. I texted her back, requesting that she repay my money immediately, and informed her that the bank was investigating the fraud. My fingers trembled with wrath as I typed, creating numerous errors that I had to go back and fix. The small apartment felt suffocating, so I threw wide the window to let in the cool evening air. A siren blasted in the distance, echoing the alarms blaring in my head. Her response came almost immediately, claiming ignorance and advising me to be more careful with my passwords, followed by a mocking kiss emoji that made my teeth tighten. "I have no idea what you are talking about, big dude. Perhaps you should use stronger passwords than Ryan's birthday." Very predictable. My stomach turned at the nonchalant brutality of her words. She had not only stolen from me, but she had used my love for Ryan to accomplish it. That's when it struck me. Samantha had asked to borrow my laptop 3 months ago to accomplish a school project when she came to visit. I had stepped out to get us lunch, leaving her alone with my computer for about an hour. She must have installed a keylogger or retrieved my saved passwords. I recall that day perfectly today. It had been raining, with fat droplets splattering against my apartment windows. Samantha had arrived suddenly, stating her laptop had died and she had an assignment due. Against my better judgment, I invited her in and offered to make her tea while she worked. She declined the tea, but asked if I could get us some lunch from the deli down the street. "Take your time," she'd urged, her smile menacing in retrospect. "This might take a while." I had been gone for about 45 minutes when I returned with sandwiches to find her casually reading social media and pretending to have finished her work. I spent the next hour in a panic, changing every password, enabling two-factor authentication, and analyzing my devices for malware. Then I contacted Ryan, who was understandably outraged when I recounted the scenario. He pointed out that her SMS was incriminating evidence and encouraged me to denounce her to the police. Ryan's voice remained steady and mature beyond his years as he guided me through the practical measures I needed to take. I could hear him moving around his dorm room, with drawers opening and closing as he multitasked, most likely gathering his own financial documents to ensure their security. "Document everything," he recommended. "Screenshot her texts, the bank statement, everything. This isn't just theft, it's identity theft. It's a felony." I hesitated, divided between family loyalty and the desire for justice. The next day, I traveled to my folks' house and practiced what I would say. The drive to my parents' place was uncomfortable, and my knuckles turned white on the steering wheel. I walked by familiar places: the elementary school Ryan and I had attended, the park where I taught him to ride a bike when his parents couldn't be bothered, and the ice cream shop where we'd celebrate his high grades with the lowest cone they sold. Each place increased my determination to fight for what was right. I anticipated them to be surprised, and perhaps even apologetic for raising such an entitled daughter. I was mistaken. Their house looked the same as always. Well kept on the outside, a beautiful facade concealing the dysfunction inside. The garden was perfect, with fresh mulch and flowering flowers that my mother cared for with more attention than she had ever given her kids. I parked behind my father's new SUV, Another reminder of the financial differences I was only starting to realize. My mother answered the door with a forced smile that faded when she noticed my look. I didn't bother with pleasantries, instead informing her that Samantha had stolen every penny from my bank account and that I needed their assistance in recovering it. The living room was precisely as I remembered it, with family portraits on the walls, though I realized with a pang that the most of them portrayed Samantha alone or with our parents. The few that included the boys were group photographs in which we were positioned on the periphery, almost as afterthought. The aroma of my mother's potpourri hovered in the air, sickeningly sweet and artificial. My father came behind her, arms crossed defensively, implying that if I had assisted Samantha when she needed it, she would not have had to take matters into her own hands. His face, with its habitual severe lines and continuous condemnation, gave no sign of concern for my circumstances. He stood in his well-pressed khakis and polo shirt, the embodiment of suburban respectability, defending what amounted to felony theft. The hypocrisy was astounding. I stood there, mouth open in surprise, as my mother dismissively claimed they had no idea Samantha had done anything illegal and blamed me of being jealous of Samantha's popularity. "You've always been jealous of your sister," my mother continued, her tone condescending. "Ever since she was born, you've tried to compete with her. It's not coming." She straightened her cardigan, an anxious behavior I remembered from childhood fights. "Besides, family helps family. If Samantha needed money, you should have given it to her." The conversation quickly escalated from there, and I stormed out in frustrated tears. As I departed, I spotted a framed photo I hadn't seen before. Samantha in a cap and gown at her high school graduation, my parents beside her. There was no accompanying photograph of Ryan in his valedictorian regalia. There was no pompous exhibition of his academic achievements. This final affront increased my rage, and I slammed the door behind me. When I came home, I learned that I had been removed from the family group chat and blocked by both parents on social media. My phone, which had been ringing with notifications throughout the drive home, suddenly remained silent. I checked the family group chat. You can no longer message the group that displayed on my screen. A quick check of my parents' profiles revealed the prohibited user notification. They had digitally expelled me from the family for daring to question Samantha's actions. Later that evening, I received texts from my two middle brothers, Ethan and Lucas, inquiring what had happened. They were surprised, but said they felt powerless to oppose our parents. Ethan's text appeared first. "Mom and Dad said you accused Samantha of theft. What's happening?" Then Lucas. "They're quite upset, bro. Dad is ranting about ungrateful children again. Are you okay?" Their communications had the familiar tone of treading on eggshells, which was a survival strategy we'd all mastered growing up in that environment. Ryan contacted me that night, and before I could finish describing my financial position, he sent me $1,200, nearly everything he had saved for college. I pledged to repay him, as tears flowed down my cheeks. But he merely reminded me that we have always taken care of each other. "We're brothers," he added, his voice strong despite his young. "This is what we do." I could detect determination in his voice, the same grit that had carried him through years of being disregarded and devalued. In that moment, I felt both immense pride in the man he was becoming and profound grief that he had to mature so quickly. The next morning, I was unable to access my work email, resulting in a fresh issue. A call to IT revealed that someone had attempted to access our company server with my credentials, resulting in an immediate security lockout. Nina, an IT specialist with a pleasant voice and technical expertise, explained what had happened. She explained that the login attempts originated from an IP address in the next county over. They tried a few different password combinations before the system locked them out. My blood raced cold as I understood how far Samantha was willing to go, not only stealing my money, but also ruining my job. I presented the situation to my supervisor and showed him time-stamped proof that I was in a meeting when the login attempt occurred. He believed me, but advised me that I needed to deal with my personal difficulties before they compromised my job performance. My supervisor, a generally understanding man in his 50s with salt and pepper hair and reading glasses permanently perched on his nose, frowned as he examined the information given. "I believe you," he finally replied, reclining back in his chair. "But this company can't afford security breaches. Fix this, whatever it is." The unspoken menace lingered in the air. Samantha's animosity threatened my employment, which was the only source of income I had left. That evening, Ethan and Lucas visited my apartment. We spent hours piecing together years of Samantha's manipulations. When things went missing, rumors circulated, and relationships were strained. We'd always discounted these occurrences separately, but taken together, they created a clear pattern of premeditated behavior that had been occurring since childhood. My little living room became command center as we spread years of evidence over the coffee table, floor, and kitchen counter. Ethan, the always organized one, made a timeline on my whiteboard. Lucas, with his keen memory for detail, recalled incidents I'd long forgotten, such as the time my high school girlfriend abruptly ended our relationship after Samantha accidentally showed her fake text from my phone, or the soccer trophy that mysteriously vanished the day before a family gathering at which I planned to display it. Lucas recognized loudly that she'd been doing this her entire life, and our parents had supported her every step of the way. "Remember when I got accepted to that summer science program?" Lucas asked, his voice hushed with realization. "And suddenly Mom and Dad couldn't afford it? But 2 weeks later, Samantha got that expensive phone?" He shook his head, connecting the dots we'd all been too conditioned to see. They weren't just playing favorites, they were actively sabotaging us to build her up. A week later, Ethan learned via a mutual acquaintance that Samantha had a new boyfriend, Brandon, a well-off student whose parents owned many local businesses. We decided I'd write Brandon an anonymous note, simply advising him to be cautious about lending money or providing passwords. Ethan showed me Brandon's social media profile, which depicted a clean-cut young man with an easy grin and expensive clothing. His most recent posts featured him with Samantha at fancy restaurants and elite clubs. One photo showed Samantha wearing a necklace that looked remarkably similar to one I'd seen in our grandmother's jewelry box, a family relic that had purportedly been lost years earlier. The warning backfired spectacularly. Samantha figured out I was behind it and informed university administration that Ryan had been stalking and threatening her on campus. He was summoned to a disciplinary meeting, which may have jeopardized his academic career. Ryan contacted me from outside the administrative building, his voice tense with repressed panic. "They won't tell me exactly what she's accused me of," he complained. "Just that there's been a serious complaint about threatening behavior." I could hear the fear underlying his cool demeanor. Samantha's falsehoods put everything he worked for at danger. Fortunately, one of Samantha's former pals, Jess, produced screenshots indicating Samantha made up the entire tale. Jess, a tiny girl with bright blue hair and several piercings, had been Samantha's roommate briefly before they fell out. "She did the same thing to me," Jess recounted as she met Ryan and me at a coffee shop near school. "Made up stories, took my things, tried to turn my friends against me. I've been keeping receipts ever since." She pushed her phone over the table, displaying a text discussion in which Samantha plainly stated her intention to get Ryan into trouble in retaliation for Ethan's warning. The problem worsened when Lucas discovered Samantha's GoFundMe page, which claimed she was fleeing an abusive familial situation. The page featured expertly manipulated photographs of old bruises from a skiing accident years ago and raised more than $3,000 before we could denounce it as fraudulent. The page was removed, but Samantha suffered no serious penalties. The GoFundMe website was expertly designed, with professional-looking graphics and a terrible story of alleged physical and emotional abuse. "My brothers have made my life a living hell," the description stated. "Now they're trying to prevent me from getting an education and escaping their control." Reading those words on Lucas's laptop screen, seeing our family history inverted, made me violently uncomfortable. My financial condition was becoming worse. My landlord was remarkably sympathetic, but he could only give me another week before late fees kicked in. My automobile wouldn't start one morning. The mechanic confirmed that someone had put sugar in the gas tank. The fix would cost approximately $800. The mechanic, an elderly man with grease-stained hands and honest eyes, showed me the damage. "Never seen sugar do this much harm," he added, referring to the rusted fuel system. "Someone really had it out for you." I stood in the repair shop, the scent of oil and rubber filling my nostrils, wondering how much Samantha could tolerate from me before she was satisfied. I filed a police report and set up a surveillance camera outside my flat, feeling as if I was under siege. The officer who took my report was professional and empathetic, but not overly hopeful. "Family disputes are complicated," she explained, her pen moving quickly across her notepad. "Without direct evidence linking your sister to the vandalism, there's not much we can do." I nodded, acknowledging the reality but still feeling abandoned by yet another system that was supposed to provide security. 2 weeks after the first theft, the bank completed their investigation and said they would refund my money. When our Aunt Diane called, she began the conversation by accusing me of spreading lies about Samantha based on what my mother told her. Aunt Diane had always been my mother's closest ally, mirroring her views and supporting her decisions. Her voice on the phone sounded sharp and disapproving. "Your mother is heartbroken over how you're treating your sister after everything they've done for you boys." The frequent phrase made my teeth tighten, as if providing basic essentials for your children was some incredible act of kindness that demanded lifetime thanks. After I explained the problem and supplied her documentation, she became an unexpected ally, causing waves throughout the extended family as she challenged my parents' version of events. Aunt Diane's tone changed dramatically after reviewing the evidence I had provided her. "I had no idea," she remarked, her voice subdued from amazement. "Your mother always made it sound like you boys were difficult, and Samantha was the easy child." I could hear her shuffling papers, most likely going through the bank statements and screenshots I had sent. "This isn't right. None of this is right." Ryan called me in a panic one evening to inform me that Samantha had arrived at his dorm crying, stating she wanted to make amends. "She was waiting outside my door when I got back from the library," Ryan said, his voice tense with anxiety. "All tears and apologies, saying she wanted to fix our relationship." He recalled how he calmly but firmly requested her to leave, then watched through his peephole as she quickly dropped the act, pulling out her phone with a sneer. "I heard her clearly, saying I'd shoved her against the wall and threatened to make her pay. It was surreal. She was creating the narrative in real time." The next morning, I received an anonymous email threatening Ryan with losing his scholarship if I didn't back off. The email arrived at 3:17 a.m., its threatening tone intensified by the late hour. "Your brother's academic future depends on your cooperation," the note said. "The scholarship committee would be very interested to learn about his harassment of fellow students. Back off now." The message was sent from a generic email account, but Samantha's writing style was unmistakable, with its theatrical flair and excessive punctuation. We needed leverage. Ryan gained access to Samantha's old email account, where we discovered years of correspondence between Samantha and our parents about money transfers, as well as advice on how to manipulate situations to her benefit. Ryan mentioned how he remembers Samantha using the same password on different platforms, which was a combination of her birth month and our mother's maiden name. "She never thought anyone would try to access her accounts," he told me. We scrolled through the emails. "She doesn't realize that her greatest weakness is thinking she's smarter than everyone else." Samantha wrote in an email shortly after my bank account was drained that I couldn't prove anything because she'd used a VPN and my own computer. "I finished it today," Samantha had wrote to our mother. "Used his own laptop through a VPN so it can't be traced back to me. The best part is he'll never be able to prove it was me." Our mother's response was similarly disturbing. "Clever girl. He should have helped you when you asked. Maybe this will teach him a lesson about family loyalty." Reading those lines, witnessing clear permission for theft and fraud, was the ultimate indication of how warped our family dynamic was. I gathered everything into a thorough document, set up a private blog with password security, and sent the URL to trusted family members. The response was quick. Relatives began to distance themselves from our parents. Samantha's lover ended their relationship, and without unrestricted financial assistance, she struggled to maintain her lifestyle. The document was more than 30 pages long and beautifully arranged, complete with dates, screenshots, and explanations. I worked on it for 3 days straight, fueled by coffee and righteous rage, aiming to leave an indelible record of the facts. When it was finished, I forwarded the password-protected link to a few relatives, including Aunt Diane, our grandparents, 2 uncles who had always been nice to us guys, and a few cousins we were close to. 3 weeks later, my mother requested to meet. She said they were unaware of how bad things had gotten with Samantha, but I contradicted her, pointing out that they were well aware of the situation but didn't care as long as it didn't touch them. We met in a neutral location, a coffee shop midway between our homes. My mother appeared smaller in some ways, her neatly maintained looks displaying signs of strain. Dark bags under her eyes, a misplaced button on her cardigan. Minor details that betrayed the flaws in her polished facade. "We just want to fix this," she continued, her voice lacking in confidence. "We're still a family." They pledged to reduce Samantha's extra cash and assist Ryan with college. But that evening, Samantha sent me a threatening letter, stating that I had just made matters worse for myself by turning everyone against her. Samantha ensured that the letter came by certified mail so that I couldn't claim not to have gotten it. The mail had 3 pages of accusations, threats, and venom, with the handwriting growing more irregular as the letter went. "You've ruined everything," she wrote on the last page. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of. This isn't over." The final straw came when Ryan found Samantha had applied for a job at his company and included me as a reference with a slightly altered spelling of my name. Ryan sent the material to HR, along with documentation of her previous fraudulent claims. Ryan received a call about the application from the HR director, a woman with whom he had developed a positive relationship during his internship. "Something seemed off," she explained. "The reference letter was enthusiastic but vague, and the contact information was similar to yours, but not exact." Ryan recognized it as another of Samantha's plans, this time seeking to enter his workplace and maybe wreak further damage. Samantha's actions finally had actual consequences. She was blacklisted at the company. Weeks later, Ryan observed her working at a neighborhood coffee shop, the type of minimum wage job she'd always despised. He just texted me. Karma finally caught up. The letter contained a snapshot taken quietly through the coffee shop window. Samantha was wearing a regular apron, her hair pulled up in a sensible ponytail rather than her normal ornate style, and she was serving clients with a fixed smile. Ryan's letter included no hostility, only a gentle acknowledgement that actions have consequences. I wish I could say this was the end of our family drama, but real life isn't that simple. What changed was us. The four brothers became closer, forming their own support system. We celebrated holidays together, helped one another overcome obstacles, and created the family we deserved. Our first brothers-only Thanksgiving was hosted at my place. We put my small dining table against the wall and sat on cushions around my coffee table, each providing our fair share to the dinner. Ethan provided store-bought buns and canned cranberry sauce. Lucas cooked a pretty tasty green bean dish. Ryan, remaining in his room, was only able to bring sodas and paper dishes. I cooked a little turkey that barely fit in my oven and made lumpy but wonderful mashed potatoes. Nothing matched. Nothing was perfect. But it was the best Thanksgiving lunch we'd ever had. I discovered that sometimes the family you are born into is not the one that deserves you. Sometimes you have to create your own. Standing up for yourself isn't always about winning. It might also mean refusing to play a rigged game any longer. This awareness came gradually, like the gentle dawning after a long dark night. We were deliberately forging the familial relationships that should have been our birthright every time we chose to support each other, whether we celebrated a victory or comforted each other over a setback. The weight of seeking approval from parents who would never provide it began to ease off my shoulders, to be replaced by the true bond I felt with my brothers. The road has not been easy. My parents still try to guilt us into attending family gatherings, generally when extended relatives are visiting and they need to keep up appearances. Last Christmas, they sent extravagant gifts to all of us, which felt more like bribes than real demonstrations of love. Ryan and I returned the items unopened. Ethan and Lucas kept theirs, but gave the equivalent amount to a nonprofit that helps victims of financial exploitation. The gifts were delivered in identical silver paper with intricate bows, evidently professionally wrapped. Mine had an expensive watch with this message on the back: "Family is forever." The irony was not lost on me. Ryan's box contained a laptop, the very item he required for school that they had refused to assist him with months before. We repackaged them on the same day they arrived, with a short note: "No thank you. We've established clear boundaries now. I solely speak with my parents via email and keep track of everything." Samantha has made multiple attempts to re-enter our life, each time with a supposedly sincere apology that usually leads to a request for money or favors. We have learned to recognize the pattern. Her most recent attempt came last month, when she called Lucas in tears, stating she had changed and wanted to make amends. He listened patiently, then asked her to show her seriousness by immediately apologizing to Ryan for the false accusations she had leveled against him. She quickly turned defensive, blaming misunderstandings and overreactions, indicating that her remorse was as superficial as ever. The most significant change has occurred in Ryan. He graduated from college with honors and obtained a full scholarship to graduate school. At his graduation supper, surrounded by his siblings and the chosen family we've created, he thanked me for being the father he needed when his biological parents failed. There was no dry eye at the table. We celebrated in a small Italian restaurant near campus, complete with checkered tablecloths and candles and wine bottles. Ryan stood to offer a toast, his graduation cap still on his head and his eyes filled with emotion. "To my brother," he added, lifting his glass toward me, "who taught me that family is about actions, not blood. Who showed me what it means to truly care for someone? Who was my parent when I needed you most? The lump in my throat made it impossible for me to answer verbally, but the tight hug we shared was sufficient. Lucas and Ethan have individual success stories. Lucas discovered his affinity for counseling and currently works with young adults from problematic backgrounds. Ethan, the most reticent of us, has become a financial literacy advocate, leading workshops on how to protect oneself from identity theft and financial abuse. Lucas's office is a welcoming environment with comfortable chairs and soothing lighting. On his desk, there is a tiny frame with this quote: "Be the person you needed when you were younger." It aptly describes the mission he has taken on: to help people negotiate their own complex familial situations. Ethan's transformation has probably been the most startling. He used to be so quiet that he could go entire family gatherings without speaking, but today he stands boldly in front of groups of people, providing practical advice on how to protect financial assets and recognize indicators of financial control and abuse. "I was silent for too long," he said to me once. "Now I speak for those who still can't find their voice." In my experience, family is defined by acts rather than blood. I found serenity by setting clear boundaries and developing relationships based on mutual respect rather than obligation. My apartment, which was previously merely a place to sleep, has now become a true home. Photos of my brothers and our chosen family adorn the walls. Weekend dinners around my little table, which has now been extended with a leaf to accommodate our increasing group, have become a treasured ritual. These rooms are filled with genuine laughter, which is a stark contrast to our childhood home's tight, on-edge atmosphere. I still get angry when I think of all those years of unfairness, of witnessing Ryan cry himself to sleep, of barely getting by while Samantha had everything she wanted. However, those moments become fewer with time. When I observe a father painstakingly training his youngster to ride a bike in the park, or when a co-worker recounts a family trip where their parents paid for everything, my fury bubbles up unexpectedly. The same burning builds in my chest, prompting the query, "Why not us?" It threatens to overwhelm me. But I've learned to accept these emotions without allowing them to consume me, recognizing that while the past cannot be changed, I can still shape the future. I ran into Samantha at the grocery store last month. She appeared exhausted, with her luxury attire replaced with old jeans and a faded t-shirt. For a brief period, I felt the old protectiveness I had kept for my brothers. She was in the produce department, meticulously checking pricing on different types of apples, displaying a level of financial acumen I had never seen before. Her hair was pulled back in a basic ponytail, and her face was free of makeup, revealing the armor of her regular flawless beauty. She seemed younger, more vulnerable, and strikingly similar to our mother. Then I remembered the bank account, the automobile, and the phony allegations against Ryan. I nodded nicely and continued shopping. She called after me, wondering if we could talk and maybe have coffee sometime. Her voice had lost its customary entitled edge, and it sounded almost humble. "Just 15 minutes. She murmured, her eyes darting uncomfortably to the floor before returning to my face. "I just want to talk." Part of me wondered if this was another ruse, another attempt to reclaim what she had lost. I stopped slightly before telling her I wasn't prepared for that. Maybe someday, but not today. As I went away, I realized I felt no joy in her seeming troubles, only deep regret for what may have been. As I proceeded toward the checkout, the weight of my grocery basket tugged at my arm, my mind racing with images of other universes in which our family had been different, where all 5 children were valued equally. We grew up supporting rather than undermining one another. The grief was not only for my brothers and me, but also for Samantha, a youngster conditioned to feel her worth stemmed from being preferred, and who never understood the actual meaning of family. Our parents created this situation by pitting their children against each other, telling Samantha that she was entitled to whatever she desired while teaching us that we deserved nothing. In the end, they lost 4 children who would have loved them unreservedly, and the 5th was permanently wounded. The fundamental tragedy is that it was all completely needless. There was enough room in our family for all of us to be loved, to be praised for our distinct strengths and supported through our particular problems. Instead, our parents established an artificial scarcity of affection, as if love were a finite resource that could only be given to one child. The 4 of us brothers continue to meet for supper every Sunday. We take turns hosting. But Ryan's cuisine is widely regarded as the greatest. We discuss our weeks, offer advice, and occasionally reminisce about the few wonderful memories we had from childhood. We have developed our own customs, inside jokes, and definitions of family. It isn't flawless, but it's ours. founded on mutual respect and real caring. Last Sunday, we gathered at Ryan's new apartment, which is the first place he's lived that felt completely his own. The kitchen is modest but functional, and he walked confidently through it while preparing his specialty lasagna. Lucas brought some salad. Ethan handled the drinks. I was in charge of dessert, which was a homemade apple pie that didn't look nice but tasted good. We ate at a table Ryan had refinished himself, seated in mismatched chairs that nevertheless fit together wonderfully, much like us. I often wonder if our parents completely grasp what they lost. 4 boys who would have cared for them in their old age, brought grandkids to visit, and carried on family traditions. Instead, they are left with Samantha, who continues to call them only when she needs money. I image them in their home, surrounded by photos of their beloved daughter, wondering why their sons had drifted apart. Do they ever consider the implications of their actions? Do they realize that the partiality they believed was innocuous has cost them a future filled with family? Or do they still believe they were correct? Samantha earned everything, while we deserved nothing. She was living with them again when I last heard, after being evicted from her apartment for non-payment of rent. They made their choice, just like we did. According to Aunt Diane, who occasionally keeps us updated, Samantha returned home due to roommate problems, most likely code for another situation in which her actions resulted in consequences she was not prepared to confront. Our parents transformed their home office into a bedroom for her, complete with new furnishings and decor. The cycle continues. The patterns remain constant. I have no regrets about confronting Samantha or exposing her behavior to the extended family. What I regret is how long it took me to recognize that I deserved better, Ryan deserved better, and all of us deserved more than to be treated as inferior just because we were not the daughter our parents desired. For years, I believed that we were somehow lacking, that we needed to work harder, be better, and do more to deserve the love that should have been freely given. Breaking free from that perspective was more difficult than standing up to Samantha or addressing our parents. It requires the breakdown of notions established in me from infancy, recognizing my own worth, regardless of their approbation. If there is one thing I've learnt from all of this, it's that you can't change people. You can only adjust your response to them. We decided to respond by starting our own family, one founded on love, rather than obligation or manipulation. And by doing so, we broke the cycle that our parents attempted to imprison us in. That is not just surviving. That is prospering. Our Sunday dinners, holiday festivities, and daily text messages to check in with one another are the threads that weave the tapestry of our chosen family. We made something beautiful out of the broken parts we were given, something stronger and more authentic than what we left behind. In the end, that is the most significant triumph of all. Not only do you want to get out of a poisonous circumstance, but you also want to create something significant. Am I the asshole for altering my cousin's wedding dress after she gave it to me, then uninviting her from my wedding after she got upset about the changes? Original post, I, 18F, am getting married in the middle of October to my boyfriend, 19M. We're planning on a smaller scale wedding with mostly just friends and family, and considering that we both have large extended families, it was definitely a challenge planning for that many people. For a general idea of how big my family is, just my mom has 7 siblings who all have children of their own. With our small budget, I was looking at redesigning or upcycling a wedding gown instead of having to devote a huge amount of money towards a brand new dress. I mentioned my plans to a couple people and was in the process of looking at options when my mom's oldest sister's daughter, my cousin, reached out to me. Megan, 40F, got married in 2015. The marriage didn't last very long and they got divorced soon after. I barely remember the husband, as he never came to family gatherings and Megan and my mom aren't particularly close, so I was surprised she was offering something so important after a long time of distance. Regardless, Megan had offered to give me her wedding dress, as it was my size and she knew we were trying to avoid spending a crazy amount on a small budget. I loved the idea and the dress was beautiful. I did make sure she was comfortable giving it to me rather than loaning it, and she assured me that it held no emotional significance and she couldn't care less if she didn't have to hang on to it. I thanked her and took home the dress. One thing about me, however, is that I am a very chaotic seamstress, and I make the majority of my own clothes. And while I did love the original dress, I wanted to make some small changes to the hem and neckline to fit the theme better. The original dress was super full skirted with a long hem, and since my wedding is outside, I wanted to make sure it wouldn't be dragging in the dirt. So I took some layers off the underside, removed the trim and removed the sleeves to tighten the bodice. I was so happy with how it turned out, and my mom and friends agreed that it was perfect. Here's when the trouble started. My mom had taken a picture of me trying on the dress and decided to send Megan a picture alongside another thank you. However, she responded with a cold comment over text and called me later that night. She said that I should have asked her permission before ruining her dress, and that if I had thought it was so ugly before I should have bought my own. I tried to explain that the changes I made were small, and that I did ask before I took it if she wanted it back afterwards. She blew up at me saying that it was too different, and that she could never wear it again, even though she never gave the impression that she wanted to. Megan has already started before that she has no interest in getting remarried ever. I asked what she wanted me to do and she snapped at me that it was too late. She hung up and has apparently been telling people I slutted out her wedding dress and made sure I would embarrass her by outdoing the original dress. I don't know what to do about it. The wedding is way too close to consider making myself a dress, and I have my heart set on having something unique and personal for my wedding. Her mother called both me and my mom saying I should have asked, that I'm a spoiled brat for taking advantage of Megan's kindness and generosity. My parents and a few family members who I've told think I should uninvite Megan and just wear the dress, but my aunt is saying I would break Megan's heart unless I find something else. Should I give up on my dress and see what else there is? To provide some context and answer some questions, Megan and I are not super close, from both the age gap and different lifestyles. Megan is the third cousin out of 21. I am the ninth. Megan, being the first girl child in the family, grew up with a lot of expectations and pressure, and ended up marrying a very religious and controlling husband. After her divorce, Megan went through what can best be described as a breakthrough and re-evaluation of her life and ambitions. Since then, she has completely changed her job, appearance, and opinions. She is no longer an active member in family events and only takes part in important ones like birthdays, funerals, and weddings. Despite this, we have never had any problems between us and our interactions have always been civil and kind. Secondly, the alterations I did were only limited to the skirt and bodice. The slutted out comment apparently stemmed from my removal of the sleeves, turning it to a sleeveless top, and raising the hem to a T-length. My ankles are exposed now. Someone had pointed out to me that Megan's anger was a product of her own self-esteem, as she has naturally grown and gained weight since then, which I could definitely see even though she is still beautiful. And thirdly, I am definitely planning on regular updates if any more incidents happen up to the wedding, and a full breakdown with photos after the ceremony. Thank you to everyone for their kind messages and loving support. You've all made me feel so much better and I appreciate you taking the time to comment. Update. As of yesterday, I found out from my fiancé that Megan had reached out to him with false concern about how my home-styled dress gave the wrong idea about our wedding and had the audacity to ask him, the man I've been in love with for nearly 3 years, if he was sure he wanted to marry a woman who wouldn't put in the effort of getting a proper dress. She says this as if I hadn't spent weeks sewing the dress to make sure it was perfect. Thank goodness my fiancé wasn't upset by her attitude and responded that I had put way more effort into the dress than she put into her marriage, and that shut her up real fast. She turned around and apparently has been crying to my elderly grandparents, her mother, some of the other cousins etc. that I'm a trashy whore with a cheap shotgun wedding. I'm not even pregnant LMAO, with a fiancé who is only interested in our family's money. My fiancé is a mechanic, and regardless of the fact that he is doing really well and makes a pretty good salary, she still seems to think he's beneath her. Some of my older cousins, the ones I don't talk to as much, have actually expressed concern about whether or not they want to go to the ceremony at all. I blame my aunt for spreading misinformation, which I managed to assure them wasn't true. After all of this, I reached out to Megan saying that because of all her comments and insults she is no longer invited to the wedding. I admitted that I was sorry for the situation, but I can't keep pardoning her rude comments on what is supposed to be a happy time in my life. She snapped that she wouldn't show her face at my pathetic excuse for a wedding, and that she can't wait to see how I act when he leaves me. Overall, I am pretty confident that Megan and I's relationship might not recover, but at this point I don't regret anything. Here's hoping everything else cools down in the next couple weeks and I can go into our day with no negativity at all. Am I the asshole for altering my cousin's hand-me-down wedding dress after she told me I could have it? Top comments. Commenter 1, wear the dress, invite the cousin. Use the pieces of the dress to make a decorative pillow for your rings and present it to her at the reception as the best cousin ever for gifting you the dress. It will be a public moment and you will never hear about it again. Commenter 2, totally NTA. Your mom blew it by taking photos and posting. That was unfortunate. Issue 1. Issue 2, do you have that text or email agreement, paper trail, of her IDC about the dress convo that you can refer back to? Sorry that you're going through this. This isn't something any soon-to-be bride needs to deal with. Truly, Sounds like she was more emotionally connected to that dress than she thought. There's nothing you can do at this point other than add a note of appreciation of her selfless offering of the dress. Don't uninvite her, just make sure one of your MOH are watching her on your day. Commenter 3, NTA. If your cousin didn't want it changed, she should have said, don't make any alterations. It sounds like you made some sensible changes, don't let her ruin your day. Commenter 4. Your cousin specifically told you that she was giving you the dress and she didn't want it back. So now you are the owner of the dress. You can make any changes you want to it. She can't come back later and attach conditions to the gift. It's your dress OP, you should wear it. Let aunt and cousin know that you will be wearing the dress and they are welcome to attend, but you understand if that's too much for them. Update. Hi everyone. I made a post on this subreddit a few months ago about my 18F wedding dress and all the surrounding drama that came from it. I had been given my 40F cousin's old wedding dress from a failed marriage and altered it to better fit the needs of my ceremony and my style. She did not appreciate the changes and became very rude and hurtful. My wedding was 6 days ago and I was asked to do an update, and I am happy to share how it all went down. I am still so happy how my dress turned out, and was very glad to have shortened the train, as there had been rain the night before and morning dew on the grass. The shorter hemline saved me a lot of mess and damage in the long run. Plus, I felt beautiful and it made such a special day all the more amazing. I had told my cousin, Megan, that her behavior was rude and unnecessary and that I did not want her bringing her unpleasantness to my day. However, her mother, who had been one of her primary supporters, had apologized in order to go to the ceremony. So while Megan herself was not actually at the wedding, I had not completely excluded the issue. Megan's mother, 71F my aunt, is your basic senior white woman, and usually expresses her opinions in a loud and unspoken manner, so I was uneasy in the beginning when she arrived. She didn't make a fuss throughout the ceremony though, and everything went smoothly. I sneezed while walking down the aisle, but that wasn't anyone's fault in particular. The reception was at an outdoor garden where we had set up under a gazebo with a temporary floor for tables and eventually dancing, with a slightly elevated platform for the big table and speeches. This is where my aunt decided to make sure everyone knew about her daughter's dress. After a few speeches, following my friend's champagne rendition of That Time We Went Camping and the tent slid down a hill, she made her way up to the podium. She started her speech in the usual, unassuming way, congratulating us and remarking on how far we've come as people. Unfortunately, she decided to tie this statement into a comment of, "You've even made your own dress." I mean, not really, actually, it was Megan's first. She then went on into how she remembered shopping for the dress with Megan for her own wedding, and going on and on about how it was perfect and made for her. At this point in the speech I was just staring at her in confusion, while my husband and everyone else just sat there awkwardly waiting for her to be done. She finished her speech with a half-assed backtrack to me looking lovely and wishing us good luck on our marriage. She mumbled back to her seat and let the ceremony keep going, looking entirely too proud of herself. Other than that, the only other trouble she caused was her apparently showing everyone she could manage a photo of the original, which is really not that bad in the grand scheme of things. I am so happy that my family and friends were able to be there and celebrate with us, and can't wait to see what comes for us next. Thank you again to everyone who commented and reassured me in the beginning. You've all been so kind. Who knows, I might even dye the dress another color and keep it around just in case an appropriate event comes up. Relevant comments. Commenter 1. When you got the dress, did you get permission to alter it? Perhaps there might have been an expectation for it to go back to her when you were done with it. OOP, I did. I mentioned in my original post that I had asked specifically if it was mine to keep and she agreed. That was a big worry of mine in the first place, but she told me she had no attachments to it. Commenter 2, you should reach out to your aunt and thank her for making a speech showing her support of you and your marriage. You got so many compliments on the work you did to the dress after she pointed out that you did all that yourself. Everyone was super impressed by the before and after pictures, so you wanted to give her a personal thank you. I think that they would have made comments about it being cousin's dress, and shown pictures, if you didn't make adjustments. So I think you picked the better path. Commenter 3, once someone gives you something it is yours to do with as you wish. If she didn't want you to alter it in any way she should have put that condition on the give. Then that way you could have refused it since it wasn't as you imagined your dress to be. You weren't wrong and your aunt and cousin need to suck it up and never mention it again. My sil threw a fit when I refused to pay for her bachelorette trip and now she's blaming me for her fiancé leaving and the wedding being cancelled. My sister-in-law, Stevie, 26F, and I share a lot of history because we attended high school together. Back then she was a major bully, and I happened to be one of her favorite targets. Why not? I was a huge nerd in high school, and my appearance didn't help. I was quite tiny and wore braces, making me the stereotypical nerdy girl in a teenage high school movie. Instead of glasses, I wore braces, and my transformation did not occur until I was in college. Fortunately, I look considerably better now, having gained some weight and had my braces removed before beginning college. Not that there was anything wrong with my appearance before, but now I'm less likely to be bullied, which is all that matters. I met my spouse Andy at a college party a few years ago, when I was in my third year. He was 3 years older than me and previously worked as a DJ on the side. I got pretty drunk at that party, and because my apartment was so far away and no one else was accessible, he offered to bring me back. He was kind enough to drive me home and even wrote his phone number on the back of my hand, saying I could call him if I wanted because he liked me. The next morning, I awoke with a severe hangover, but knew I had met someone wonderful. I called him, asked him out for a date, and that was all. We got along incredibly well on that first date, and I felt I'd found the one. But there was one issue: his sister. On our first date, we discussed our families, and Andy stated that he has a sister named Steffi. I joked about having a high school bully with the same name, but he looked at me seriously and said it could have been his sister, who had some behavioral issues back then. When he informed me the name of her high school, we discovered that his sister was my high school bully. It felt embarrassing, but I didn't let it interfere with our time together. I told him it wasn't a huge thing because I preferred him over his sister, and he agreed. After 3 months of dating, we decided to introduce each other's families. While it was reasonably easy for me to introduce him to my family, he found it tough and unpleasant because he was aware that his sister and I did not get along well. I was anxious the first time I had supper with his family, mostly because of Steffi. But it didn't go that terrible. His parents were really warm and friendly to me, and Steffi was cold and aloof, but it was still better than how she treated me in high school. I preferred this new version of her since it was much easier to deal with. She didn't say anything to me and kept our interaction to a minimum, which I viewed as a victory because it meant we could simply ignore one another and move on. I consider myself fortunate because this has been our relationship for the past few years. I haven't had much interaction with her, and she has never showed a desire in becoming friends with me. Even after Andy and I married 2 years ago, she only spoke to me as much as was necessary. So I'd say Stevie and I aren't particularly close, and we both enjoy it this way. After the way she treated me in high school, I doubt I'd want to be friends with her. Andy isn't bothered by this because he knows how harsh his sister can be. He doesn't mind that the two of us don't talk, and he understands that I haven't forgiven her for the way she devastated my high school experience because she has never expressed regret. You can't forgive someone who doesn't even apologize, and Andy understands that. He and Stevie have a regular sibling relationship, which I'm fine with because I know he does not perceive Stevie in the same way that I do. It's also been a long time since high school, and I don't want to urge my husband not to communicate with his sister or create unnecessary drama. She and I are now civil, and that is all that matters. Everything is okay in the family. I was surprised when Stevie contacted me a few weeks ago and asked if I wanted to join her on her bachelorette trip to the Greek islands. She didn't simply ask me over the phone, she invited me over to lunch. I was skeptical at first, but Andy urged me to try it, so I went. During lunch, she invited me to join the excursion. She was pleasantly kind to me, and she even apologized for how she treated me in high school. Instead of ignoring our shared history, Stevie addressed it for the first time. I was surprised since I hadn't expected her to admit to the constant bullying. When it eventually happened, I didn't know how to react. She apologized for how she had treated me, admitting she was just being a brat, and said she discovered her error too late. She also claimed that she had never brought it up, even after I began dating her brother, because she was uncomfortable confronting the past and didn't know how to face me after everything she had put me through. While discussing all of this, she even shed some tears, making it appear extremely sincere. As the naive emotional person that I am, I fell for it. I told her that I had forgiven her and that everything was in the past because I no longer had any issues with her. We were all adults, so we could deal with it the way we were supposed to, enjoy a few drinks together and forget about it. She appeared pleased with this, and we ended the lunch on a positive tone. She invited me to accompany her and her pals on their bachelorette vacation to the Greek islands because she wanted to make up for lost time and make me feel like a friend. Initially, I was apprehensive to agree, but she persuaded me. I eventually accepted since I believed it would be a nice experience and could help me develop a friendship with Stevie. I was tired of the tension we felt any time we were in the same room. After much debate, I agreed. I wanted to move on from the past and give our relationship a new start, and I saw no better way to do it than to go on a trip and let our hair down. That was a few weeks ago. Stevie and I have been in touch since then. She was being married next month, and we were due to leave for the vacation at the start of this week. However, the trip was cancelled due to a prank she played at the airport. She felt she could fool me into paying for the entire trip by breaking the news to me at the last minute, figuring I wouldn't cancel. She had no idea how easy it was for me to walk away, unlike her. I didn't care what her friends or she thought of me. We arrived at the airport approximately an hour before our aircraft was due to depart. We were all speaking when Stevie suggested we go get coffee, so I joined her. At the counter, she casually said, "Oh, by the way, I hope all your cards work internationally, because otherwise, you'll have a hard time paying for things." I informed her I was carrying cash for souvenirs and little purchases, but she explained that she meant hotel rooms, food, and even aircraft tickets, and that I would have to reimburse her for everything. I was really caught off surprise. We had never talked about this before, and half an hour before our trip was hardly the time to bring it up. She kept speaking in a casual tone, so I questioned if she expected me to pay for myself during the vacation. To my surprise, she said, "Not only for yourself, but for everyone on the trip, including my friends and me. I assumed you were going to sponsor the entire event, which is why I chose such an expensive location. I know you can afford it, will that be a problem?" I still recall her exact words and can hear her tone in my brain, as if it were the most apparent thing in the world. But we hadn't talked about it, and I had never agreed to something like that. I questioned whether she was serious, and she admitted that she had expected me to finance the entire trip. She claimed if I didn't, she'd think I was stingy and selfish because I had the highest salary she knew. She couldn't think of any reason why I would say no. But I could think of several reasons, beginning with the fact that I never agreed to this. She did not even ask if I was comfortable with it. Yes, I did earn more than most others she knew because I am the vice president of a relatively large corporation. However, that did not obligate me to support her travel. We weren't there yet, especially since we were still developing our connection. And I was certainly not going to consider paying for a vacation for a group of people I didn't even know. More importantly, it was my money and my decision. She could call me a miser or a stingy person, but it wouldn't matter to me since I wasn't going to spend a lot of money on a vacation I didn't even plan and on people I didn't know or care about. After a while of standing there while she grabbed her coffee, I decided to stroll back to where everyone else was sitting, gather my belongings, and leave. This was silly, and I didn't want to cause a commotion in a public place, so I left quietly. Stevie raced after me with her coffee, while her pals tried to figure out what was wrong, but I didn't believe it was necessary to explain anything to them. I just walked out of the airport, hopped into the first cab I saw, and went before they could find me. As soon as I got into the cab, I decided to block Stevie so she couldn't call me and bother me further. The next thing I did was phone Andy and tell him what had happened. I felt awful for him since he had been so happy that his sister and I were finally getting along. I expected this trip to help our relationship, but we were both mistaken. When I called him and informed him what Steffi had tried to do, he was much more furious than I was. He said that was inappropriate behavior and that he would call his parents right away to discuss it. I believe he was more disappointed with his sister than I was, because I knew she was a bad person and wasn't surprised by what had transpired. Andy and his parents, on the other hand, had undoubtedly anticipated more from her, and she had truly disappointed them. I believe that's what really messed things up for her after that, because as they found out what she was up to, they were all furious. Andy didn't say anything to her directly, but I could see he wasn't going to let this go since it was demeaning to me, and he was disappointed in his sister. When I returned home from the airport, Dad informed me I didn't need to speak with Steffi anymore. Not that I needed to be informed twice, I didn't want anything to do with her in the first place. I didn't hear from anyone in his family for the rest of the day, including his parents, but I knew Andy was on the phone with them all day. I elected not to discuss it with anyone because tempers were running hot. I knew everyone was already unhappy, and I didn't want to exacerbate it. I just stayed silent and waited for the storm to pass. 2 days passed with nothing happening, but I did chat with my in-laws. They apologized for how Steffi had treated me. I told them that it was no big issue because it was not their fault. I saw how wonderfully they had reared their son, so I knew their parenting was not the issue. Steffi was solely responsible for how she turned out. Andy and I got back to normal quite shortly after that. I didn't ask him about the implications of Stevie's conduct since I wasn't interested in them. All I knew was that I wouldn't have to engage with her anymore, which was plenty for me. But then, 2 days after the incident, I learned that the wedding had been cancelled and her fiancé had left her. That was the indirect result of what she had done to me. When Andy and I returned home from work that day, he informed me that Stevie was blaming our family for her breakup with her fiancé. I wasn't sure how that was even logical, given that we hadn't spoken to her since the airport incident. Apparently, this all happened because After Andy told his parents what Stevie had tried to pull at the airport, they called her and asked her to apologize to me. However, Stevie didn't believe she had done anything wrong. Instead, she began telling her parents that I was harsh and stingy, and she was relieved I had left. This irritated her parents, who informed her that they would no longer be paying for the wedding and that she needed find someone else to fund her lavish occasion. Stevie attempted to seem unconcerned, but it was going to be difficult for her to cover all of the wedding expenses on her own because she had just resigned her job and started her own business a few months ago, which had yet to break even. It was not feasible to pay for anything herself. Despite knowing this, she refused to apologize or accept responsibility for her mistakes. The wedding was only a few weeks away, so this was becoming an urgency for her. According to Andy, after speaking with her parents, Stevie informed her fiancé that her parents would no longer be funding the wedding expenses and that she expected him to take over. This sparked a massive dispute between them because it was clearly unfair for her to drop this on him with only a few weeks till the wedding. That fight eventually led to the cancellation of the wedding. After Andy told me the whole story, I asked him how he knew everything. He added that following the altercation with her fiancé, Stevie arrived at their parents' house and argued with them as well. She had blamed both them and me for what had occurred. She largely blamed me, which I thought was unfair given that I had nothing to do with the incident. Stevie stated that she had to cancel her trip with her pals because I refused to pay for it. She now believed she had to cancel her entire wedding and that her fiancé would most likely end their relationship. I strongly disagree with the vacation situation, because there was never any talk about me paying for it. It was absurd of her to anticipate that. However, I feel horrible that her wedding was canceled. I've been feeling guilty about complaining to my husband and becoming so agitated over the situation. I guess I'm just sad for her because I know she was looking forward to getting married. Honestly, I'm looking for some reassurance. Is it my fault for whining to my husband about my sister-in-law expecting me to support her bachelorette trip for all of her pals at the airport? Update. First and foremost, thank you so much for informing me that I am not at blame here. I guess I needed to hear that. I was feeling bad about everything, and it didn't help that Stevie had been posting depressing things about being betrayed and such. It's been 5 days since the airport incident, and even though I've banned her everywhere, I know she's been posting bizarre sad phrases to get attention. When someone questions her about it, she tells them her side of the story while claiming to be the victim. Any sorrow I felt over her wedding being postponed has vanished because, plainly, she will stop at nothing to make me look like the villain in her story. I don't have to feel awful for her. She has even gone so far as to tell people that, while she anticipated me to stab her in the back, she didn't believe her brother would ever promote or tolerate something like this, but she was plainly mistaken, and her brother couldn't care less about her feelings. Again, I feel compelled to highlight that she had never asked me if I was comfortable or willing to cover the costs of the trip for her and her friends. The fact that she had to cancel at the last minute and return from the airport was totally her responsibility. According to her version of the tale, we had discussed it several times, but I flipped out at the airport, threw a fuss and left, which she considered a major slap in the face. She states that she and her friends had to return home without a trip, which was quite humiliating. It's infuriating how she's been spreading lies about me. However, I'm relieved that most of the relatives she's been saying this to have contacted me, as it seems out of character for me. I was able to clear the air and explain my side of the situation. Most people believe me, so whatever she's doing isn't working. She's coming across as a complete liar and moron. Andy told me he wanted to speak with her and tell her she couldn't keep lying about us, but I assured him there was no need. What she's doing is backfiring, and instead of harming our reputation, she's injuring herself. We can simply let her carry on. Update 2. It's been about 2 weeks since we learned that Stevie was no longer getting married. She had been complaining about us to all of her relatives, but it didn't work because most of them didn't believe her and turned to me for proof. I told them the truth, and within a few days, almost everyone knew what had transpired. She realized there was no use in attempting to make us appear terrible anymore, so she gave up. We assumed that was the end of the story, but evidently not. She has recently moved in with her parents because she and her fiancé broke up and she has nowhere else to go. Her fiancé, a good guy, had offered to let her keep the apartment while he moved out, but she couldn't afford the rent on her own, so she decided to move back in with her parents. Andy and I find it ironic. She had so much to say when her parents told her they wouldn't be supporting her wedding, pretending she had it all under control. But now her life is crumbling apart, and her parents are the only people she can turn to. My in-laws, being the nice people they are, took her in despite her bad behavior. But now that she's living with them, you'd think she'd have the common sense to stop talking negatively about me and Andy, especially in front of her parents, who are also Andy's parents. However, She is one of the most dumb persons I've ever met. Even after my in-laws made it clear that she was not permitted to badmouth us or behave as if we were the villains, she continued to do so in front of them. She was continually attempting to turn them against us, so my in-laws decided to inform her that she could either acknowledge her mistake and try to become a better person, or she would no longer be allowed to live with them. That, of course, irritated her, and she has now taken to emailing Andy every day, reminding him that I not only destroyed her bachelorette trip and wedding, but also damaged her life because her fiancé deserted her and her parents continue to support me. As if any of that were my fault. Andy has not blocked her yet because she is a family member, but she is on thin ice. A couple more texts insulting me, and I'm sure Andy will visit his parents' house to confront her in person. I believe she is only venting her feelings, but it is wrong. Update 3. We did it, I just couldn't handle it any longer. She was going too far, saying the worst things about me while messaging Andy, believing she could get away with it. Unfortunately for her, we are not particularly friendly. She had called me every name in the book, referred to me as jealous and insecure, and even said that I didn't look any better than I did in high school, which was a complete falsehood. She understands how sensitive I am about my appearance and makes it a point to pick on it whenever she can, which has gotten pretty obvious at this point. I also don't see why she thinks I'd be jealous of her, especially since my life is clearly better right now. She honestly has nothing to make me jealous or anxious about. Anyway, these were the types of things she had been texting Andy, attempting to irritate us, and she was successful. Earlier this evening, we went to my in-laws' house to address her because she needed to stop thinking she could say and do whatever she wanted without consequences. We had already spoken with Andy's parents, and they knew why we were there, so they didn't ask too many questions and simply allowed us in. Stevie was sitting in the living room and appeared shocked to see us. She had the nerve to ask her parents why we were there, as if we weren't supposed to be there. Her parents did not answer, so I took over the conversation. I told her she needed to learn to stop her mouth because I'd had enough of her bullshit and wouldn't put up with her constantly talking about me. I made it obvious that if she didn't stop talking about me to anyone, I'd make sure my side of the story became public as well, which would not be good for her. She quickly erupted, accusing me of blackmail and alleging her family had ambushed her. When we urged her to be quiet and simply apologize, she refused. Instead, she began packing her belongings and left within an hour, knowing she was no longer wanted and going to stay with a friend. I'm confident she'll be back in a few weeks because no friend will let her live rent-free for long. Given how much of a miser she is, I doubt she will pay when she can simply return to her parents and live for free. But for the time being, we are all free of her, and I must admit that I am much better off. I believe everyone would agree with me on that. My parents disowned me and cut me out of their will because I'm not their biological child, but inheriting from a distant relative changed everything. Let us start from the beginning. My life changed dramatically when I was 14. Around this time, my mother decided to relax again, this time with a man whose previous marriage had produced a son. Jake, already 3 years older than me, was 17. Let's also admit that we didn't get along right away. The ink on their marriage certificate had hardly dried when the tension began to rise. At first, it was the tiny issues that arise when strangers are notified that they are suddenly family and brought together. Jake would leave dirty dishes in the sink, assuming they would clean themselves. Of course, I was the one who got a lecture from my mother or new stepfather about the kitchen mess. Alternatively, I would see my shampoo disappearing faster than usual, only to discover Jake with perfectly maintained hair that appeared to have resulted from using my favorite product. It was strange, but I felt upset by more than just Jake's antics. Tom, my stepfather, handled things in the same manner. I seemed to be the problem whenever things went wrong. He'd think I was responsible without even asking. Then there was my mom. She was too focused on making this new family dynamic work to see what was happening. She'd brush it off, cover for Jake, and pretend everything was fine. I could immediately detect the difference in expectations. Mom and Tom announced they were expecting a kid around a year into our difficult living situation. At that time, everything changed. Suddenly, everything revolved around the newborn. The house required renovations, and guess which room was chosen for the nursery? Exactly, mine. I was shoved into a cramped, claustrophobic guest room with barely enough room for my possessions. It felt like a demotion, a clear sign of my role in this new family structure. A few months later, Nathan, my new half-brother, was born and quickly became the center of attention. Jake felt the same shift and grew even more entitled. He dropped out of college and moved back home, bringing with him a whirlwind of late-night parties and questionable pals who came and went at all hours. Tom dismissed my protests about the noise and trash, while my mother simply looked sorrowful, as if to say, "What can we do?" It was infuriating. I started spending more time at friends' places, anywhere I could find routine. My escape ended up being school. I stayed as long as I could, joining every organization and taking extra classes. It was more than just adolescent defiance. It was about survival. Home became a place where I always felt as if I was walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion. It was suffocating. One evening stands vividly in my mind. I got home later than usual to find the house utterly still. A note on the refrigerator indicated that they had gone out to dinner, without me. I hadn't even been invited to this family supper. That note struck harder than I expected. I felt invisible, as if I did not truly belong. And it stung. Not shortly after my 18th birthday, everything almost broke. I felt Tom disliked me having any excuse to leave the house, despite the fact that I worked part-time. He repeatedly told me that it would jeopardize my academic progress. Then one evening, I returned home to discover my room utterly trashed. Jake hosted a party while my mom and Tom were gone, and my room suffered as a result. A broken lamp, alcohol stains on my project documentation. It was an outright breach of my privacy. I challenged them at breakfast the next morning. Tom responded coldly and contemptuously, "You should have been more responsible with your belongings." My mother simply sighed and whispered something about families coming together and letting go. I had finished letting things pass. Everything I did during those years seemed to be scrutinized, but not in a way that suggested concern for my well-being. Rather, it appeared like they were waiting for me to make a mistake so they could blame me. Jake, who had turned into a professional couch potato, appeared to get away with it all. Although Nathan, my tiny half-brother, was still a child, the amount of coddling he received revealed who the favorite was. I remember one time when I was working on a large science project that I found really interesting. Even at home, working on it was nearly impossible. I desired silence, so I set up a workstation in the corner of the living room. It felt like I was trying to build something delicate in the heart of Times Square. I eventually had enough. Jake would play loud music, Nathan would run about shouting, and Tom would complain about how my project was taking up too much space or making a mess. After packing, I went to see a buddy, whose parents allowed me to work in their tranquil dining room. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was able to concentrate. That was when I realized how odd my home life had become. My friend said, "You're always welcome here." The invitation was easy, yet it meant everything to me. For me, home was just a place I couldn't wait to leave. Home is supposed to be a secure refuge, yet every hour away from it helped me breathe a little easier. I started working extra shifts at my job. Of course, Tom didn't like it. He frequently mentioned my job as a distraction from school, but I knew why he disliked it. I wasn't around as much for him to critique. As I accumulated more money, the thought of moving out began to form in my head, but I realized it would not be easy. My mother and Tom were unable of dealing with the situation. The more I thought about it, the more it seemed like the only option to regain control of my life. I was a ball of worry the day I decided to inform them I was leaving. I discovered a basic yet fairly priced apartment near my campus. From my part-time employment, I had saved enough to cover the first 3 months' rent. It wasn't a lot, but it was mine. The prospect of having my own life and space kept me focused. One evening, after dinner, I seated Tom and Mom at the kitchen table. With my heart pumping, I attempted to keep my voice calm. I looked them in the eyes and said, "I'm moving out." The room became silent, and I could feel the tension mounting. You could have heard a pin drop. Tom was the first to reply. He smiled, shook his head and said, as if I had told him the most stupid thing imaginable, "You think you're ready to live on your own, just because of your age?" His voice was filled with amazement and a trace of mockery. At first, my mother said nothing. She simply sat there, staring down at the table, her expression unreadable. "I am ready," I said, attempting to sound more confident than I felt. The disagreement began when I stated that I needed my own room and had enough savings to cover it. Tom went on a rampage, accusing me. I was selfish, unappreciative, and tried to avoid my responsibilities at home. "He looks up to you, you know," he continued, attempting to guilt me into leaving Nathan behind. As if that were enough to keep me in a hazardous atmosphere. My mother's response was calmer, but no less devastating. She did not dispute with me, like Tom did, nor did she attempt to stop me. She only continued to complain, saying things like, "Families stick together, and you'll regret it if you leave." But I knew better. This was not about family. It was about control. I stayed put not because I just desired my own space, but because I needed it for my emotional and psychological well-being. I felt like an outsider in my supposed home. I was tired of being held accountable for things beyond my control and of attempting to fit into a family that had made it apparent that I was not actually a member of it. I spent the following few days preparing. Every item I packed into a box felt like a step closer to independence, even though it wasn't easy. My mother entered my room on the morning I was supposed to leave. I readied myself for another battle, but it never happened. Instead, she helped me pack discreetly. Our conversation was brief. She asked whether I needed extra boxes or offered to donate old utensils. We both appeared to be avoiding the actual concerns, making light talk to avoid admitting that this was the end of something. Later that day, when I locked the door to my new flat, I experienced an uncommon range of feelings, including relief, grief, excitement, and worry. I was now living completely on my own. It felt simultaneously liberated and terrible. The first few nights were the most challenging. The flat seemed overwhelmingly empty and quiet. I found myself longing even the disagreeable sounds of home, like Jake's loud music, Nathan running around, and Tom's incessant nagging. However, as the days passed into weeks, I grew to cherish the silence. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. I no longer had to tiptoe around the house, worrying about Tom's mood swings or whether Jake had hosted another party. I could come and go as I liked, eat when I wanted, and sleep uninterrupted. It seemed like I was finally discovering who I was beyond the insanity of my family. A new type of freedom. Life rapidly found its groove. I balanced work, education, and maintaining my modest apartment. It was not flashy, but it was mine. My connection with my mother and Tom improved slightly after I moved out of their house. I kept my distance but saw them sometimes, which made things easier. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from my mother. Her speech was muted and more light than normal. "Tom's been thinking about his will," she added, simply as if discussing the weather. "He wants to make sure everything is in order." I reacted hesitantly, not sure where this was going. After a pause, she said, "He has decided to include Jake and Nathan but not you. Because they are his biological children, he believes it is more rational." There it was. It stings. Although I hadn't expected much from Tom, seeing it stated so bluntly hurt me harder than I anticipated. It wasn't about the money, but about the message. The reminder that, despite all these years, I was still not regarded as a member of the family. I forced myself to answer neutrally. "I understand." Mom, maybe sensing the hurt, hastily attempted to ease the impact. "You understand, this is just legal things. It doesn't impact our feelings for you, right?" Even if I didn't believe her, I allowed the conversation to divert to other issues. But the harm was already done. That night I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling, with that familiar sense of not belonging gnawing at me. Part of me wanted to confront Tom, demand an explanation, or simply tell him how deeply it hurt. However, another part of me questioned the point. For years, that family had not felt like a part of me, so why should it matter now? I ultimately decided to back off. I reduced my visits, stayed busy with school and work, and spent more time cultivating relationships with people who actually appreciated me. Friends, instructors, and co-workers who loved me for who I was, not for what I could contribute or because we had once shared a home. These were the individuals that mattered. The anguish from Tom's will and years of feeling like an outsider began to recede. It wasn't an overnight metamorphosis, but the hatred subsided, though it would occasionally boil up, especially at family events, when I saw Jake and Nathan relishing in the spotlight. I began to realize that some things were beyond my control. I started establishing my own family and sense of belonging. A few months later, Tom recovered from his health scare and their lives resumed to normal. Then came the actual test. I was invited to a family dinner to celebrate Tom's recovery. I went out of responsibility, rather than choice. The evening was just as awkward as I expected. Tom talked about his recuperation. Everyone gushed about Nathan's newest academic accomplishments, and Jake boasted about a new job he had suddenly landed. I sat there relatively silent, and it was painfully obvious that I was the odd one out. However, this time it stung less. I had come to terms with my status in the family. I was the outsider, yet there were individuals in my life that cared for me for myself, not because of family obligations or shared DNA. I made an excuse about an early start and went after dinner. As I drove home, I felt a weight lifted from my shoulders. "I'm good," I told myself. "Really good." I dealt with the emotional impact, faced the truth of my situation, and emerged stronger and more confident in myself than ever before. For the first time in years I felt peaceful. But life had another surprise in store. Just when I thought I had finally achieved some calm and routine, everything turned upside down again. One afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. His tone was courteous and professional, but his voice had an almost apologetic aspect. "Am I speaking with Jessica Evans?" he inquired. "Yes, that's me," I explained, bewildered. "I'm calling about Margaret Evans, your great-aunt's estate," he explained, his tone slow and measured. "She passed away recently and named you as the sole beneficiary." For a little period I fell silent. I couldn't recall Aunt Margaret. She was one of those distant relatives you'd hear about but never actually knew. She didn't have any children, and I faintly remembered my father mentioning her once or twice as someone who had helped raise him. I hadn't seen her in years, possibly since I was a tiny child. And now I'm being informed she's left everything to me. "I'm sorry for your loss," the lawyer said, breaking the stillness. "She was a remarkable woman." Still absorbing his remarks, I blurted out a thank you. Then, half expecting it to be something simple, perhaps an old house or a few family heirlooms, I inquired, "Exactly what did she leave behind?" "Your great-aunt was quite well off," he said. "Over the years, she made some excellent investments. The estate contains various properties, a significant stock portfolio, and a trust fund worth approximately $3 million. My heart halted for a moment. I sat there gripping my phone thinking, why me? We weren't very close. When I was younger, I paid her a few trips, but our relationship was never genuinely strong. My mind could not fully grasp it. The attorney then stated, "She left a letter for you. I will forward it together with the other documents." He noted that she went into greater detail regarding her decision. After we hung up, I sat there staring at my phone, trying to make sense of everything. Why did Aunt Margaret chose me to inherit everything? I scarcely know her. Was this some kind of mistake? The next few days were spent meeting with the attorney, signing paperwork, and discovering exactly what I had inherited. There were houses, stocks, and personal stuff in addition to the money. Aunt Margaret's letter, however, impacted me deeply. In it, she stated that she had always appreciated my independence and saw in me a reflection of herself at my age. She described me as determined, self-sufficient and capable of creating a life on my own, qualities she thought she lacked when she was younger. She wanted to offer me the opportunity to spend her riches for something meaningful. It was overwhelming. Here was this relative I barely knew, who saw something in me that my own family hadn't noticed. She appreciated and chose me. My initial move was to purchase a tiny home. Though it wasn't lavish, it was mine and represented a new chapter in my life. Thinking about long-term financial security, I also bought a rental property and invested the leftover monies. I spoke with a financial expert to ensure that I made sound judgments. It seemed weird. In the course of a week, my life had entirely changed. I no longer had to scrape by or wonder how I would make ends meet. For the first time, I felt truly secure and free. However, freedom brought a new set of challenges. At first, I didn't notify anyone about the bequest, even my relatives. Given our tumultuous past, I knew the news would not be well received. I owe them nothing. But secrets have a way of getting out, and mine was no exception. It began with a cousin I hadn't seen in years, who heard about the inheritance through legal means. My mother found out before I did, and the rest of the family soon followed suit. The phone calls started almost immediately. First, my mother called in an unusually cheerful and inquisitive tone. She complimented me, then casually stated how difficult things had been financially for her and Tom. I sensed where the talk was going, and sure enough, the floodgates erupted. Tom called first, then Jake, and then some distant cousins I hadn't heard from in years. Each intimated, in their own way, that they needed a piece of my inheritance. "Times are tough," they would say. My mother even commented, "You know how bad Tom's health has been," as if this explained their newfound interest in me. They all seemed to have forgotten about me, but only as a possible ATM. I was overwhelmed with requests for money, loans and gifts. It felt like vultures were circling, waiting for their time to swoop down. I felt overwhelmed. For a brief period, I considered quitting up, questioning whether holding on to the bequest was selfish. But then I remembered all the years I'd spent feeling like an outsider in my own family, being blamed, discarded and ignored. I had worked hard to earn whatever I had before this windfall. I had gotten it through college on my own without their help, and now that I had some stability, they wanted to take it away. When I was struggling, none of them volunteered to help. When my mother eventually inquired why I hadn't told her about the bequest sooner, I found the strength to reject the guilt and manipulation. I softly but firmly explained to her that our separation was both emotional and physical. I had been kept away, ignored, and alienated for years, as if I belonged nowhere in the family. This inheritance allowed me to live on my own, without relying on anybody else. "It is my life," I assured her, "and I must live it in my own manner. I apologize if this offends you, but right now I need to act in my best interests. The outcome of that conversation was worse than I could have predicted. Mom accused me of being arrogant and inconsiderate. Tom interjected, chastising me about how families should treat one another. Nonetheless, I stood my ground. Over time the calls got less frequent, and the demands for money ceased when they understood I would not give in. It was challenging, but extremely necessary. I had realized a sad reality about family. Sometimes the people you trust the most are the ones who bring you down. Knowing that I had protected myself brought me calm. Finally, I decided not to let them dictate my life. This inheritance was about taking control of my own destiny and, more importantly, gaining the ability to live my life on my own terms. My communication with them became strained, but I'd become accustomed to it. Their approval was no longer required, and I was not bound to offer them anything. I had friends, mentors, and people who actually cared about me, not because of familial obligations, but because of who I was. The big surprise came from an unexpected source. My younger half-brother, Nathan. I unexpectedly received a clumsy handwritten note from him. "I'm sorry for asking for money. I miss you," he wrote in his untidy handwriting. Though little, this step meant a lot to me. Nathan, barely 14, was reaching out in his own way. After that, we started texting. Little conversations about his school and interests, nothing too serious, but it was something. It was the start of a modest bridge between us, even though I wasn't optimistic about reconciling with the rest of the family. I was creating a life for myself, free of need on anyone else. For the first time in years I felt completely free. However, the impression of tranquility was fleeting. Just as I thought things had settled down, my mother contacted me again a few weeks after Nathan's letter. This time, she wished to talk things over. I could tell this wasn't going to be a chat about reconnecting or finding common ground, so I agreed to see her in public in the hopes of keeping things nice. We met at a nearby cafe and the vibe was unsettling from the start. She rarely inquired about my life or how I was doing. Instead, she got right into how difficult things had been financially since Tom's health crisis and how Nathan's private school fees were stacking up. I sat there, listening, feeling like an outsider in her list of troubles. It quickly became evident why she had requested to meet. She also added that they were thinking of upgrading the house and that she really needed a vacation to relieve her stress. It was clear she was not there to heal our relationship. She was there for a single reason. Finally, I could not stand it any longer. I cut through the tension, saying, "Mom, just get to the point." She looked me in the eye and said, without hesitation, "I expect you to write me a check for $1 million. I nearly choked on my coffee. "Excuse me?" I asked incredulously. She did not waver. "It is only fair. Technically, since it came from your father's side of the family, all of that money should have been mine." I was shocked. Her entitlement and audacity were astonishing. She sat there, casually demanding $1 million as if it was her birthright. I said bluntly, trying to keep my voice steady, "I'm not giving you $1 million. Her tone moved from entitled to plain angry, and her expression became severe. "You have always been unappreciative of everything we've done for you," she told us. Her remarks painted me as a criminal for not turning her the money she claimed she was owed. Without turning back, I paid the money and left the cafe. It still surprises me that my own mother attempted to guilt me into giving her money to which she had no right. What followed was even worse. A few days later, my mother started circulating rumors. She informed everybody who would listen that I had stolen the inheritance, saying it was rightfully hers, and accused me of hoarding it out of greed. Suddenly, relatives I hadn't heard from in years began calling, either to support her or to pressure me into sharing the money. The hypocrisy was staggering, especially given that Tom had omitted me from his own will because I wasn't family. Even Tom got involved, writing me a long guilt-ridden text about how I needed to consider the family and make more inclusive decisions. I reacted in a single sentence. "You didn't include me in your will because I'm not family, remember?" That shut him off for a while. But the drama did not end there. Things got heated when I received an official-looking letter in the mail. To my amazement, my mother was suing me. Yes, you read that correctly. She was suing me for a share of the inheritance, claiming that as my father's widow, she was entitled to a large amount of the money. I was stunned. Was my own mother dragging me to court? I could not believe it. At first I was afraid, expecting a protracted and costly court battle. I called my attorney, who laughed after reading the letter. "This is a joke," he remarked, flinging the letter away. "The will is airtight." He next investigated the so-called attorney who had sent the letter. The phone number was disconnected, and the address on the letterhead was for a decrepit building under construction. It became evident that my mother and Tom had engaged a dodgy, most certainly fraudulent lawyer in a last-ditch attempt to terrify me into paying them money. While I was happy that the lawsuit was unfounded, I was also terribly disappointed. Their willingness to go to such lengths for my inheritance was surprising. They had tried guilt-tripping and manipulating me, and now they were making direct legal threats. I was done attempting to salvage any sort of relationship with them. I understood I needed some distance. After the legal jitters passed, the emotional toll hit me hard. I was exhausted, sleep-deprived, and the constant drama was affecting my mental health. That was when I realized I needed a vacation from everything. We decided to take a road trip after talking with some of our friends. Nothing extravagant, just a trip to a couple spots we'd always wanted to go but never got around to. It was just what I needed. Time to clear my mind, escape the chaos and, most importantly, consider what I wanted for my future. As we began the road, I couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in such a little period. A year ago, I was barely making it in a house that never felt like home. I now had financial security, my own home, and the freedom to make my own judgments without interference from others. It felt liberating, yet also bittersweet. Growing up, I looked to my mother and stepfather for guidance and encouragement. To me, family meant having someone who would always have your back, no matter what. But through it all, I learned a terrible lesson. Just because someone is family by blood does not guarantee they are there for you in the ways that matter. Throughout the trip, I reflected a lot and realized that I didn't need their money, validation, or acceptance. I had everything I needed, and the relationships I actually valued were those I had formed with people who loved me for who I was, not what I could offer them. In little ways, my friends, colleagues, and even Nathan expressed more genuine care for me than my mother or Tom ever did. Following the trip, I decided to write letters to each family member who had attempted to influence me. I did it for me and not for others. It was my way of achieving closure, expressing what I couldn't say in the heat of the moment. In those letters, I detailed how their actions had harmed me and how, despite my desire to be a member of the family, I was constantly pushed aside. I wished them well and hoped they would move on, just as I had. The only reaction I received came from Nathan. His letter was modest but sincere. I appreciate you delivering the letter. I miss you. Let us get together sometime. It wasn't much, but it was the beginning. Nathan and I might one day develop something real, free of obligation or manipulation. As for the rest of the family, I had finally accepted that we were better off at a distance. The inheritance had served as a wake-up call. Not just a financial boon, but also a revelation about my true family. It wasn't the folks who raised me. It was those who supported me when I had nothing to offer but myself. Looking back, I don't have any regrets. I stayed firm, safeguarded my future and found peace by letting go of the poisonous connections that had been holding me back. Life has a peculiar way of teaching us what is actually essential, and I'm glad for that, no matter how harsh the lessons were. Sitting in my own home, surrounded by people who feel more like family than my actual relatives ever did, I know I'm precisely where I should be. I discovered my wife's infidelity after my cancer diagnosis, rewrote my will for my children, and decided to hide my illness from her. On November 5th, I got the news I had been most afraid of: aggressive stage 4 pancreatic cancer, which was confirmed by every test. This will essentially be my last holiday season. I have a strange feeling of acceptance, oddly enough. My loved ones will be taken care of, and I have had a happy life. I hadn't told my wife Emily about the test since I'm a naturally private person. Until I received conclusive answers, I didn't want to worry her. I came home early so I could have the talk I needed. I didn't want to deal with this over the phone or over text message. My life changed in a lot of ways that day, as you might have expected given that I'm sharing this now. As I arrived at the driveway, I noticed that one of my business partner's gaudy, expensive vehicle was parked there, complete with his personalized license plate. This was very odd. When I used my phone to access our home security system, I discovered that it was in private mode and not recording. I made the decision to ignore it and drove away to our rural property in order to get my mind straight. Our security system is mostly for protection, and I hardly check it unless there's a specific cause. But I also find it relaxing to watch storms approach and to monitor the wildlife on the outside cams. I have a second video recorder set up for my personal amusement in order to store the material locally, which is inaccessible from my phone. I checked the second server and opened my laptop when I got to the country house to confirm what my gut was already telling me. As expected, Emily and James, my coworker, were in the living room, dancing, drinking wine, and then going upstairs to the bedroom. Since the microphone recorded their actions after they left the camera's field of view, it appears that they left the doors open. I wanted to know the truth because I only have a short time left, but I also didn't want the drama of a fight and divorce. I lost all the love and commitment I had for her that day, so feel free to call me a coward. I know it's not my fault, but I felt every feeling you could imagine. I've been a loyal, caring, and watchful wife. I'm now concentrating on who I am and what I value most. I spoke with my lawyer, and we went over my prenuptial agreement and will. After I gave him the rundown, we got to work figuring out how long and how much of this affair had been going on. We came to the disturbing conclusion that either I never really knew the woman I had been with for more than 20 years, or something had changed drastically in her. I'm not telling Emily or my kids anything right now. I have children from a prior relationship, but we never had children together. In order to give my kids and grandkids one final holiday memory with me, I'm going to put on a brave front and get through the holidays. In addition to trying to be a loving husband, I'll be the devoted father and grandfather. For those who are curious, Emily's affair partner, James, is a widower who hasn't been married again. I don't combine friendship and business, thus he is a business partner but not a personal friend. Jessica, the mother of my twins, made the decision to marry me, and at the time, I agreed that it was the appropriate one. When the children were 7 years old, Jessica, the mother of my children, wed a lovely man named Michael. Michael and Jessica never had kids together. I've been actively involved with the kids ever since I got my act together when they were 3 years old. At that point, I began to develop into the father I had always desired. Michael, Jessica, and I are all in our late 50s. James is in his early 50s, while Emily is about 55. Both Emily and I are in our first marriage. We were married when we were in our early 30s. Update. When the twins were born, Jessica, my ex, and I were still pretty young. Even though they came as a complete surprise, we made the most of it. I'm grateful for the life I've lived and the people I've loved as I approach my last days. They cherish these final times and keep my family near. All of the grandchildren are teenagers or older, and the twins are now in their 30s. Christmas is celebrated for 10 days every year. Christmas Eve to January 2nd is when we spend time at the farm. After everyone has arrived, we all gather to cut down a tree, then we cook, decorate, play games, and celebrate as a family. Since I purchased the property, Laura and her husband John have continued this custom. I'm still determined to keep my diagnosis a secret until after the year ends. Laura wouldn't be able to hide it if I told her, and I don't want to put John in a situation where he has to tell his wife a lie. I want the week to be enjoyable for the children and grandchildren. In a few weeks, we'll have plenty of time to prepare and grieve. In the long run, Emily's attendance this week will only be a small detail. To be honest, I don't give a damn about her nearly as much as I do about the other members of the family. It's an unusual financial scenario. After we were both financially and professionally established, Emily and I met and were married. She had 2 inheritances in a trust, a solid pension, and a good job. At her urging, we decided early on not to tell each other our full net worth. Additionally, at her request, we have a prenuptial agreement that states that any assets or trusts that existed before to the marriage, as well as any income derived from them, are not regarded as marital property. In addition to covering travel, food, and petrol, I also supplied both properties, housing, and utilities. She basically had my full backing, and she spent all of her money and resources on herself. She purchased cosmetic surgery, clothing, a car, and personal trips. She has proven to be pretty disagreeable on the inside, despite her stunning exterior. I announced my retirement from the organization where I worked a few days after receiving my diagnosis. Now that I knew, I saw that Emily was a little uneasy. Since I'd be around more frequently, I can guess why. My last day of work is tomorrow, after which I'll be concentrating on spending time with my family. I don't know if Emily and James have had any more activities, but I suppose they have since I provided my lawyer access to the camera server information and allowed him to use it from his office. I don't give a damn now. James is a huge letdown, and I'm aware of my identity and value. I am not as ostentatious as James. In the winter, I prefer wearing jeans, t-shirts, and coveralls, and I drive a 12-year-old pickup truck. I am positive that James is not quite as wealthy as Emily believes him to be. How can I tell? I receive quarterly financial reports because the trust has invested in his company. My accountants and I are the only ones who know how much I have. However, let's assume that over the past 28 years, the trust has been increasing. I lead a simple life and my great-great-grandchildren have enough money to enjoy the farm and receive an education. Emily's reckoning will come when she recognizes what she's lost. I simply won't live to witness it. December was a very busy month. These past 2 weekends, we went on our customary social rounds. James attended one of the gatherings. It was difficult not to watch him and Emily. They probably didn't notice. I found it easier to maintain my composure because I'm so busy finishing things at work. Emily hasn't said anything that would make me think she's aware that I'm aware. I still share a bed with her, something I'm not proud of. Recently, I've been self-centered with her. She seems to have been using me for the majority of this year, yet I still feel like I'm taking advantage of her. Many of you have portrayed myself as honorable, but I'm not. I detest this little bit of dishonesty. Emily won't get everything, so don't stress about it. The trust is well cared for. Thanks to your feedback, I've taken precautions in case I pass away suddenly or if my health deteriorates sooner than predicted. When necessary, I have also arranged for in-home care. I will not be cared for by Emily. The lawyer will let Laura, John, and the children know if I become incompetent, and Emily will not be allowed to see me. Important papers, jewelry, and other necessities have all been relocated to a safe place. I've finally started writing letters to Emily and every member of the family. These have proven more difficult than I thought. Update: the mission has been completed. I've made it to 2024 and we had a fantastic holiday week free of trouble. I apologize in advance, but I find that laughing about my illness helps me deal with it. Recently, I've seen that I'm acting a little selfishly. I just have a few updates because everyone left yesterday afternoon. My week with my family is something I should treasure, therefore I won't discuss it. This week's observations regarding Emily. I genuinely believe that this is the first time she has betrayed me. She looked to suffer from spending the entire week with all of us. It's funny how someone's behavior makes more sense when you know something about them. The fact that she kept her phone a secret and frequently left our family get-togethers to get some air. The nicest part was when one of the grandchildren requested to accompany mom when she had to run into town. She performed nearly ridiculous mental acrobatics to resist taking the grandchild. I must admit that I asked, why not? In order to play along. Thus the affair is still going on. Now that I'm retired, she has been inquiring about my daily or weekly plans. After telling her, I inquire about her plans. To tease her, I'll propose that we have lunch later this week because I'll be in the same vicinity. A cheater's worst adversary is uncertainty. I had a meeting with my lawyer this morning. I requested him to draft documents after making some decisions. I signed a new permanent will in place of my temporary one so it shouldn't need to be changed again. I had him draft divorce paperwork in anticipation of it all blowing out. She only receives 15% of our joint assets, such as furniture and housewares, according to the prenuptial agreement and the evidence of the affair. I maintain whatever I bought with my own money, including my retirement accounts and liquid assets. She must pay alimony if I insist on it. I have a folder including all of our evidence of the affair, which I have signed and am keeping in case I need it. By selling my debt to the trust, I gave the trustees permission to exchange it for stock in James's business. In relation to the trust, I have made a decision on its management. I'm going to drop one trustee. The 4 grandchildren will make up the remaining trusteeship, with the twins receiving the majority. John and Laura will serve as stand-ins for the grandchildren. The trusteeship will pass from Laura and John to each grandchild when they become 21. Laura receives the additional portion if any is left over. Next week, Laura, John, and the children will meet with me. I'll tell them everything I know. They will want to know why I'm doing this and will need to sign documents. My liquid assets, personal property, and the funds from James's loan will make up my personal value after this is over. In the worst situation, Emily's share of the trust's assets and worth will be minimal. I'll distribute the few personal belongings I wish to give to the children and grandchildren over the course of the upcoming weeks. My lawyer already has access to those in a secure area. A few of you made remarks on my health. I'm not resisting this, to be clear. I'm not experiencing any negative side effects from any treatments because I'm letting nature take its course. The family also observed that I was getting weary more readily. I dismissed it as simply growing older. The cough that started it all is still with me. My lung tumors were the cause of the diagnosis. I dismissed it as a persistent cough from a previous illness. When other problems start to surface, I anticipate things going south rather quickly, but by then, everyone will be aware. I want to be with the family as much as I can. With all of their various responsibilities, a big vacation would be difficult, which is why I found this week to be so crucial. It was the final time I could spend a lot of time with them all. We'll see, but I'm considering taking a quick trip for myself. I want to spend a day with every child and grandchild individually. That is my next objective. Update: the twins, Laura, John, my lawyer, and a notary came to my farm today. I've finished the things I needed to, and this process has gone about as smoothly as it could have. The family is understandably upset. The tension in the room was evident when everyone came and saw my lawyer and the notary. I requested that they simply sit and listen to me, and then sign the documents once I was done. I would respond to all of their inquiries after signing the paperwork. Everyone is aware of the trust. I informed them that it was time for me to give them authority over the trust. I explained how crucial the trust had been to my life, why I had established it, and how we had decided to keep it apart from my marriage to Emily. Additionally, I included instructions on how I wanted the trust to be used and managed. We clarified that the twins and the grandchildren would share the trust, with Laura and John serving as stand-ins for the grandchildren until they are all 21 years old. They signed the forms and had them notarized, which demonstrated their confidence in me. Following that, copies were compiled, and I fired the notary and my attorney. I thanked them for coming out on a Sunday after seeing them out. As usual, they were both polite. They were all silent when I went back to the dining room, which was also being used as a conference room. The first person to break the hush was my daughter. It was not so much a question as a stream of thought. I began by talking about my health as soon as she paused. I described my diagnosis. I heard them planning how we were going to combat this. I stopped them right here. After outlining the likelihood and letting them know that I had already had a second opinion, I informed them of what you are all well aware. I will not be seeking treatment, I will allow nature to do its thing. We argued for the next hour or an hour and a half. Laura had to go fetch my daughter after she fled the room many times. My son John and I had a heart-to-heart while they were away. They can relate to my perspective. They understand, even if they disagree. Everyone agrees that once things settle down, Laura and my daughter will change their minds. When did I find out? That was the next question I knew was coming. I informed them. After that, there was more anguish and rage. I clarified that I was not a walking corpse and that I wanted one more holiday week. I was self-centered. After the holidays, I wanted my diagnosis to be made public. For the rest of their lives, I didn't want it to ruin their vacations. Sensing there was more, my daughter started investigating me. Until everything was out, she would not leave the room. Why in the world hadn't Emily told her, she asked. I dropped the final bombshell at that point. I explained to them what I had done in my initial post. For the first time, I could actually see my daughter's eyes blaze with rage. I then informed them that Emily is still unaware that I'm aware of it. I suppose you all prepared me effectively since I addressed the schemes and plans they had in mind, scenarios you all suggested, and I responded to the same questions. I assured them that I valued them far more than Emily in the end. I simply want to be at peace and not worry about Emily for the rest of my life. During the holiday week, I had to defend what I had done. They also pieced together her going outside to breathe and her decision to go into town without the grandchild. They were concerned that I was doing this by myself. I informed them that I have pals on social media that support me throughout my darkest moments. I still want this space for me, but I won't tell them where or how, they'll find out later. We've been discussing intermittently as a group for a few hours, and the emotions were pretty raw. However, I informed them that I had to return and discuss the trust. They are aware that the trust will be highly beneficial in preventing Emily from gaining access to my hard-earned money. She didn't attend this meeting because it protects them. Having stated that, I had to disclose the trust's finances. They all probably thought of the trust as a way to avoid paying taxes or as a way to safeguard assets in a marriage if the children are from a different woman. They weren't ready for me to give them the money. The audience became quiet as I began to review the balance sheets and assets. Then came the inevitable question. Why did you have this much after all those years of hard work? I gave them my personal financial theory, which they had heard a lot of times and had absorbed. However, I informed them that I had been living off the trust for years. I trusted them enough to send them to college. With that faith, I set aside time in my life for them. And because of that trust, I was able to work for a non-profit organization essentially for nothing. If I were to leave them and their kids with one example, it would be to utilize this trust to better the lives of others. Not simply to sometimes write a check to a charity, but to work for a cause they support. By educating others and fostering relationships, I've achieved far more in my years with this nonprofit than I ever could have with a check alone. I'm not pleased that I was responsible for so many positive and negative changes in everyone's lives around that table today. Although everything didn't go as planned, it's finished. They are fully aware of it. I pleaded with them to let me deal with Emily and to keep the trust a secret. For the time being, we'll maintain the status quo, but when I recover, things will be different. They all concurred. Over the course of the following few hours, we divided into smaller groups, spoke, cried, laughed and prepared a supper. I expect the twins to return, but they all left an hour ago. I love my two in-laws very much, and I know they'll tell their spouses what's going on. That's just the way they are. I was aware that this was the last peaceful evening I would have. Even though I feel like a weight has been lifted, concern has taken its place. A brief update is provided. One of Emily's pals paid me a visit, which caught me off guard. Her name is Carol, and she is roughly Emily's age. Last week, she went out with Emily for a girls' night out. The girls actually spent the evening at Carol's place. If you have read my remarks, you are aware that Emily used a ride-sharing service and returned home pretty drunk last week. Emily and Carol have been friends for a long time, but I suppose that after more than 20 years of marriage, Emily has forgotten that I introduced them. My folks were friends with Carol's parents. I suppose Emily's instability has been exacerbated by my unpredictable behavior, and last week's girls' night was a tipping point for her. She became so drunk that she told Carol about her romance. Carol reportedly urged her to stop talking, but she persisted. She continued to provide more and more information, which infuriated Carol. Emily continued to lay forth an endless stream of details while attempting to explain her behavior in response to Carol's constant criticism. The following day, Carol contacted Emily. Emily apparently had no recollection of the previous evening. Carol summed up Emily's confession, but Emily denied having an affair outright, saying Carol was wrong and that she didn't say such things. Emily was told by Carol that she was full of lies, and she was given a week to come clean or else she would tell me directly. Carol paid me a visit over coffee since Emily said she had said nothing. Emily gave me a condensed version of her confession. I surprised Carol by informing her that I already knew, even though she anticipated me to be distraught. When Emily made this confession, I asked her if anyone else was present. The only other person in the house was Carol. If Carol had told anyone else, I inquired. She was angered by that. Before telling me, she assured me she wouldn't spread such a thing. I apologized and clarified that adding more people would make my preparations more difficult because I had my own schedule for handling Emily. Carol understood. As a favor, I begged her to keep it a secret from everyone and to give Emily the impression that she believed her. Carol felt the second section didn't feel right, but she did agree with my original request. I assured her that I would be all right and begged her to try. Carol stated I only needed to ask if I needed anything else. When Carol learns about my condition, I'll have to apologize again, but I'll take care of it another day. I will thus confront Emily tomorrow. I'm going to calmly tell her what I know about my condition and how I'm going to live the rest of my life without her on our regular date night tomorrow. I hope there won't be much drama because it's public. After dessert, I'm going to approach her. I'll tell her what I know and request that she not get in touch with my family or me. Let's see how it turns out. According to Mike Tyson, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. Yes, not all plans work out the way you had hoped, and mine is no exception. Allow me to lay out my plan for you. Emily and I usually go to the same restaurant for our weekly date night. We have a regular table because we have been visiting there for so long. It's at the back, away from the lively atmosphere beside the bar, but still open to the public. I made the decision to confront her here. After dessert, I intended to do it. I made accommodations for my lawyer and his spouse at the same time. Before we started, I paid the waiter, who has been serving us for years, for both of our meals. After I left, Carol was available to assist Emily. I intended to discuss our relationship as we finished the meal. After recording it, I intended to approach her, explain how I found out about the affair, let her know I was diagnosed, and lay out my future plan. I would write a letter to her requesting that she not come to the farm or get in touch with my family. They would witness the letter. Along with the divorce papers, I would hand her a briefcase full of supporting documentation before getting up and leaving. I thought she would keep quiet to preserve her social standing. Yes, I did videotape the exchange. She raved about our excellent teamwork and the wonderful relationship we had developed over the years. I questioned her about my treatment of her, whether I had ever mistreated her, etc. Certainly not, she said. I then questioned her about her infidelity. She claimed that although she was unaware of what Carol had told me, Carol was mistaken. I informed her that I knew before Carol did. Emily was obviously rattled at that point, and I believe everything she had prepared to respond to this talk vanished. Her face's color also changed. What? Was the only thing she could ask. She nodded in agreement when I requested her to give me some uninterrupted time to do this. Her once self-assured and arrogant demeanor changed to one of deer in the headlights. She was just able to nod. I described how after my doctor's appointment I hurried home to have the most challenging conversation with the one person I wanted to talk to. I clarified that I saw his car when I pulled up. After that, I noticed that the cameras were in privacy mode. I made the decision to visit the farm. She nearly cut me off when I reminded her that I still had film, but I simply raised my hand to remind her to wait. I informed her of my diagnosis and my intention to not battle the illness. I became enraged when I noticed the anguish in her eyes. How could she be sad about me? But I took a step ahead. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I had already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kid seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The waiter came over to fetch my lawyer after I gave her a signal. Both of them arrived at our table. I was given a briefcase and a letter-containing folder by my lawyer. I informed Emily that when I left tonight, I didn't want her to get in touch with me or my family or visit the property. I asked the server to see me signing the letter. After that, the lawyer and server observed me hand Emily the letter. Then I brushed them off. Finally, I handed Emily the briefcase. I informed her that I knew a lot more than she had anticipated. I was completely ruined. I informed her that I'd already signed the divorce papers, which she could sign to begin the divorce process. I informed her that I didn't think I would make it through a contentious divorce. She can remain at the house in town as long as I'm here, but I'll be at the farm. After tonight, I won't see her again. Excuses were not what I wanted to hear. I informed her that I had phoned Carol to assist her in getting home. Emily maintained her poise in public as usual. She simply said, "But," and I informed her that I was finished and heading out. The owner apologized for not alerting him, and I went to the server and left her a nice tip. I saw Carol and my son at the door as I was leaving. Carol smiled briefly as she walked past me, but her eyes were worried about Emily. I was driven to the property by his wife when my kid seized my truck. On Friday night, my son and his spouse stayed with me. At midnight, I eventually persuaded them to leave for home. I felt a lot of comfort when I went to sleep, but I also felt a fresh sense of loss. Nevertheless, I managed to complete the task at hand. On Saturday, the family stopped by the farm to check on me. It was a nice day, until Carol stopped by in the afternoon, but I felt a little pampered. She claimed that despite Emily's breakdown on Friday night, she spoke with her affair partner on Saturday. After the talk, Emily became aware that she was in a terrible position and that he was only using her. Carol made careful to let me know that although Emily didn't want her to get in touch with me, she believes that if I could have a brief conversation with her, it might give her the willpower to avoid me. Carol is skilled at phrasing her requests. I grudgingly consented to speak with Emily for 2 hours at the farm. Emily could pick someone to be there for her, and I would have someone there for me. It would be a polite discussion. I refused to be diminished, blamed, or the target of blame shifting. The meeting was intended to give her answers regarding the next steps. The meeting took place this morning. I don't know why, perhaps to limit the harm, but Emily picked Carol, and I went with my daughter. In order to prevent this from happening again, I wanted Emily to feel as comfortable as possible. I had a clear direction and aim going into the meeting. To get rid of Emily. The conference proceeded according to plan. Emily sought to downplay the affair while crying and apologizing. I refused to put up with it. I explained that she needed to come to terms with the fact that she would have a home to reside until my death. The trustees would make the decision regarding the house after my passing. I clarified that she would not get any money from my estate or the trust, but she would be okay since she has her trust and her 6-figure pension. "Why won't you fight for me or us?" she said, and I have to vent about it. "I just don't care about you or us anymore," was my response to her, even though I nearly lost my anger. She was kind of wrecked by that. This is where I vent my rage. This is what a self-centered cheater thinks. They only consider themselves. They believe they are valuable enough in the eyes of the person they have destroyed to be worth fighting for. Although she didn't want them in retrospect, she received the answers she requested. Another meeting is not something I want. I believe that holding more meetings only serves to divert my attention from my goals. After leaving with Emily, Carol returned a few hours later. I spoke with her briefly. The trustees reportedly informed the affair partner that they would be converting the loan into shares in his business, and since the trust will own the bulk of the shares, they are requesting a thorough forensic audit. With her MBA, my daughter isn't wasting any time. I suppose Emily recognized what I had already thought when she turned to him for solace. He was exploiting her to try to get her to buy the debt from me. I suspected he was up to something because of several casual remarks in the recordings. The affair partner now knows that I sold the debt to the trust after the paperwork was filed, and since Emily is no longer in my life, he can no longer utilize her. He informed her. It seems that Emily also told Carol that she would only have her pension income going forward because her trust had run out. Compared to me, she thought living with the affair partner was more glamorous. She genuinely believes that his wealth surpasses mine. While my husband played on his farm, drove an old truck, and we traveled economy class, he travels in first class, drives lovely cars, and dines at upscale restaurants. When he declared his unwavering love and desire to marry her, she was preparing to file for divorce. I find it disgusting that she is so shallow and greedy. Although I won't be able to see it, I anticipate that my family will inform her of my value when I pass away. I'm so relieved that her actual nature has come to light so that I can deal with her and protect my family. Then Carol surprised me by doing something very different. Since I'm no longer burdened, she advised me to call her if I need company. Why would she or any woman want to spend time with me given my diagnosis? I questioned her. Nothing long-term exists. She retorted that any divorced or widowed lady would be eager to spend what time she had left with me, even if Emily was naive and unaware of what she had. She claimed that I'm a great man and that she would treasure any time spent with me. She even made a joke about how many women would be lining up to call me, so she might as well be first in line. She replied, "But most people won't know Emily and I are separated. Emily doesn't want the social groups to know, but she and Laura will make sure her tale is heard," she added. Being courteous, I promised to inform her. She kissed me on the cheek and grinned. After she departed, I gave it some thinking, but I'm fairly certain that I don't want that hassle in my life at this time. These are the highlights, although I left a lot out. It has been a roller coaster, but I'm doing fine. I just need some quiet time for a few days. My condition and the dissolution of my marriage will soon be known to the social circles. There will be a never-ending flow of well wishes for me. I didn't want to be treated differently, but I knew I couldn't put it off indefinitely. But life happens as it does. Update. To start, I'm doing fine. I'm still above ground and warmer than normal. Being on my feet every day is a blessing. I'm feeling a little uncomfortable and my coughing has gotten a little worse. I see that it's getting easier for me to wind up. But all in all, this week has been fantastic. First, let's talk about Emily. She's disappeared. Her standing in the community has quickly and severely collapsed. She was respectfully asked to step down from all of her leadership positions after it was made public. She has been severely criticized by the majority of her circle, who have even asked her directly if she pursued their husbands. She has made several attempts to contact me, but I have not answered. I urged the individual to tell her that I had stated what I needed to say and that I knew what I needed to know, even if there were a few efforts made through proxies. It doesn't really matter to me if she needs closure. Why should her self-centered need for that concern me? She understands my feelings. I even shared some of the affair's specifics with her. At least 6 months have passed since it began. They traveled together 3 times. Once as newlyweds, once as a couple commemorating their 20th wedding anniversary, and once as a couple who met on vacation and stayed at the same hotel. Role-playing must have been an element of their relationship. She used our home because she felt at ease there and because it is tucked away from the road, making it impossible for onlookers to see the automobiles in the driveway. She even purchased a second vehicle for herself and kept it in a local parking garage. In order for no one to recognize her car when she traveled to the affair partner's residence, it seems that she switched cars. Perhaps in order to avoid me catching her, she was rather worried about how people in her social circle would perceive this. The amount of work she put into the affair is evident from her acts alone. All of these endeavors help me to firmly establish my feelings and my approach to handling the affair. I don't regret anything I've done. My unpredictable nature was only partially to blame for the inebriated revelation to Carol. It seems that he began to distance himself from Emily as soon as he received the news that I was selling the affair partner's debt to the trust. She must have gotten drunk and vented to Carol because she was under pressure to avoid being caught, and since her affair partner was no longer interested in her. You are aware of what follows. I think the affair partner's motivations for getting involved in the affair were very obvious. Emily is made even more pitiful by this, which in no way excuses her. The affair partner apparently needed Emily's assistance with his loan, while Emily desired a more opulent lifestyle with his wealth. It's fascinating how unattractive individuals are drawn to one another. We can find better mates if all of us nice folks just let the vile people get together. I apologize to those who strive on reconciliation out of dedication. It was not for me. My daughter's goals have angered the affair partner. In court, he seems to be attempting to stop her. More money is all he stands to lose. Rumor has it that he has attempted to gather funds from other investors in order to repay the loan, but sadly for him, word of his conduct has already begun to spread among my business associates. Do you recall that you should invest in people rather than businesses? Well, not many people are interested in investing in him. I'm not sure what my daughter has in store for his business, but she will put in a lot of effort to make sure it survives, just for the people who work there. I believe she is concerned that the partner in the affair may have something to conceal in the company's records. I hope it's something that can be fixed for the benefit of the staff. It has been wonderful spending time with family. This week, my family and I attended a high school basketball game. I organized a poker night as well, and it went really well. At the game were my son, my grandson, and a few old friends. The grandson witnessed how traditional men spent a night together, sitting around sharing stories. I'm hoping to add a couple more of these. This week, our family has eaten together 3 times. One evening, Carol did visit and bring food. I kept her at a distance as we conversed and ate. I'm still hesitant to let her in. Farm chores provide me comfort. I assist with equipment maintenance, check on the staff and animals, and occasionally drive the fences. I feel at ease knowing that this farm will remain in the family and continue to operate. I will always have a piece of myself. Many of my friends and acquaintances have paid me a visit. I believe this is what someone meant when they spoke of a living wake. I'm urging everyone to visit me outside. Even if it might be our last time together, I like spending time with these people. I was in the hospital for a few days, but I'm home now. I was taken to the emergency room after they discovered me breathing but unconscious. Despite my do not resuscitate order, I never passed away. I have always detested hospitals, and now that I have been diagnosed, I detest them much more. I don't wish to pass away there. I've spent some time at home. I'm unable to drive off the farm anymore. I'm determined to continue performing my duties and taking in the sunrise and sunset for as long as possible, even though they really don't want me to drive on the property. I also employ full-time home health aides, or babysitters as I refer to them, but I won't argue with the family about that. Basically, until I woke up in the hospital, I had no memory of anything. Carol and the majority of my family were present. By that point, I was stable, and the physicians only wanted to keep an eye on me for a day or two while, of course, doing more tests just to be sure. Carol, Laura, or my twins were with me nearly all the time. On one occasion, I woke up alone in my room with Emily by my side. She must have played the wife card on a duty nurse who was unaware that she should be denied entry. She was playing the kind and loyal wife, but I was exhausted. I have no idea why. I withdrew when I noticed she was caressing my head and holding my hand. She was wounded. She then began a new refrain in which she apologized profusely, claimed she was attempting to take advantage of him, and that she didn't mean anything she said to him. I did nothing but sit there. She was furious by this. She insisted that I speak with her. The nurse noticed her because she was just loud enough. Emily's behavior and my uneasiness were observed by the nurse. The nurse was slick. She wanted to do some checks, so she instructed Emily to wait outside. The nurse asked me whether I was all right when Emily left the room and the door was shut. I informed her that there should be notes stating Emily is not permitted because she was my ex-wife. After expressing regret, The nurse asked how she might help me feel less stressed. She should phone my emergency contacts, I asked. Carol and Laura, my daughter, entered the room after around 45 minutes. Emily had returned by that point and was still babbling, albeit quietly. Emily knew she had to go as soon as she saw them. I whispered to her to leave. She didn't deserve to cause a spectacle for any of the other patients. I told her to get over her self-centered thoughts and just go. She gave me a short peck on the forehead before leaving, which I really appreciate. For the sake of the other patient's peace, I backed down a little, but whatever. I received a lot of apology from the women in my life. Since they have their own lives, I can't really be angry with them. They all came up with a way to guarantee that I'm always accompanied. I'm never by myself in the house because they switch shifts. Carol and my daughter have been especially watchful. To keep an eye on who enters and exits the residence, they even built a security system. Even with all the craziness, I occasionally find some serenity by listening to the animals at dusk, seeing the sunset over the fields, and knowing that I've done everything I can to make things right before my time comes. I am appreciative of my family and friends' love and support. Emily's intrusion was distressing, but it strengthened my resolve to cut all ties with her. Now, I'm concentrating on the time I have left and creating memories with the people who are most important to me. To ensure that I would never be left alone again, they planned shifts. My daughter probably expressed her gratitude to the nurse for summoning them and her ire at the staff for allowing Emily to enter despite clear orders to the contrary. This incident just serves to highlight Emily's tendency to grasp at anything, much like a drowning person. She doesn't think I'm unique. She only views me as a tool to help her stay afloat. Every time I interact with Emily, I am struck by how much more sinister and evil her soul is. The partner in the affair is still just as much of a jackass as he was. In conversations with my daughter, his accounting department essentially provided her the full picture since they know where the wind is blowing. The affair partner has not engaged in any illegal activity related to his business. He was obviously abusing every benefit and legal loophole to boost his income over his base wage at the expense of the company's bottom line. He will be extremely irritated when my daughter assumes leadership because he will see a 60% decrease in the company's value to him. His flamboyant lifestyle is going to face a brick wall because I have a suspicion that she may simply terminate him and demote him to a silent minority owner position. Although he has threatened legal action, he has not yet taken any concrete steps. His reputation and credit are severely damaged, in my opinion. Carol is now a more enduring presence in my life. I must admit that I enjoy the company and friendship. Perhaps she is exhausting me. Several days a week, she has been staying over. I'm hoping to recover as quickly as possible, but I'll need to rely more on other people now that I can't drive. I have never been in this situation before. Carol has volunteered enthusiastically to help me in this area, and before you ask, no, we are only sitting next to one other. This evening, it's time to unwind and begin dinner. I want to thank everyone once more for their support. Your messages mean a lot to me, and I will make an effort to go back and reply to them all. Update. I regret to inform everyone that my father passed away last week. He asked me to give you your letter from him, among other things. You are aware that my time here is coming to an end if you are reading this letter. I made movies and wrote letters to every member of my family, as many of you suggested. That made me decide that I should write one last letter. To all of you, that letter is addressed. I want to express my gratitude to everyone for their suggestions and support. I have valued this brief period of life greatly, and my family will undoubtedly value it long after I am gone. That final Christmas week spent with my family was my last present to myself and to you. I would have had to turn to my family if I didn't have a place to vent and get support, which would have meant giving up on my objective. It may not be a present to my family now, but it will be in the future. The amount of fun I had creating those short flicks is beyond words. Thanks to all of you, my family will have another little piece of me. Without your advice and support, I never would have made any of those goofy little videos. To be honest, I never would have considered it. For all of you, I do have one request. My family will experience a range of emotions. I am aware that you all want a resolution, which is why I put my tale out there. Please refrain from making too many demands for updates and give my family time to grieve. I have requested that they provide you with this letter and, if possible, a final update on Emily. It is up to them to make that last update. Please be patient, everyone. Lastly, from the great beyond, I send you my best wishes and all the love I can provide. Keep in mind that nobody can guarantee tomorrow. Recognize the value of life and savor each moment. Treat yourself and those around you with kindness. I pray none of you have to follow in my father's footsteps, but if you do, know that I will do everything in my power to support you. Keep in mind that you are all really valuable. Nobody should ever tell you otherwise. From wherever I wind up, I'll give as many virtual hugs as I can. Thank you is all I have right now, yet it frequently feels so insufficient. I appreciate everything you've done. I hope that we will cross paths again in the hereafter, but not too soon. To be clear, I am the daughter of the individual who sent the letter in the last update, whom some of you believe to be my brother. In fact, it was me. I'm happy Dad left you all this letter so he could express his thoughts. In terms of Dad's death, he did not endure the same level of suffering as others who would have had his illness. I find solace in the fact that he passed away peacefully while he was sleeping. In keeping with his character, he had scheduled an autopsy in advance to make sure Emily couldn't use any aspect of his illness or demise to challenge his wishes. He had a knack for making plans for everything. I find comfort in the knowledge that there was some mercy at the end, even though it turns out that he died of a heart attack. He was cremated as he requested. While the remainder were scattered during the spring planting, some of his ashes were interred with a monument in an ancient farm cemetery. His desire to be a part of the land he loved so much was fulfilled. Emily wasn't there when we had the memorial on the farm. Security had been set up by the funeral home to make sure she couldn't go. For years, Dad had been trying to get us to move to the farm. When he retired, he even planned out home sites in the hopes that we would all move there. He had been made fun of, but we didn't take his suggestion seriously. In retrospect, I regret giving her such sway. My brother and his wife, along with my husband and I, will be relocating to the farm beginning this year. We have chosen a stunning location. At our insistence, Mom and Tom will move into Dad's home. We should all be closer together. It just feels right. Regarding Emily, witnessing her world fall apart has taught me what it really means to be a pariah. Her personality has entirely changed, and she appears to have aged 20 years in just a few months. She challenged the trust assignment and the will, but those issues were promptly settled, and she was unsuccessful. Although Dad had already given away the things he desired, she did receive their joint assets. The main problem was that she couldn't claim the house in town, which Dad had owned before they were married. She pleaded with us to give it to her. In one of the most fulfilling moments of my life, I promised her the house if she returned to using her maiden name as her last name. She accepted the offer even though the house is worth much less than the happiness she would get from removing her father's last name. I anticipate her selling the house and moving out. I don't really care, but I hope our partner has learned a valuable lesson in life. The company is in the process of rebuilding, and we have selected a new CEO. Carol received a single trust share. As Dad would have wished, we will look after her. Because of what she did for our dad, she has been a pillar of our family and will always be regarded as such. Our last update was in 2024. I am quite saddened by the fact that this will be the first year of my life without my father. I wanted to swing by and update everyone on the situation with my father's family. We celebrated our week-long holiday custom, which my father loved very much, as you are already aware. The week was excellent, if bittersweet. Dad was successful in uniting Carol and the rest of the family. We cherish her romantic, if you will, time spent with my father during his most trying times. He left one last gift for each of us, along with messages for the entire year. They moved us to tears and were so considerate. He gave Carol one final task, but I anticipate that there will be letters for the grandchildren at all of their significant occasions. The first occurred at a high school graduation last spring. This year, the home's construction is moving forward. I began to understand what Dad cherished about this farm, the seasons and the life cycles that exist here. I now have a better understanding of his choices from the previous year. Even while I still disagree with some things, I now have a greater understanding. Not as fervently as he did in the end, but it's just another barrier between us. I also began to observe the sunrises and sunsets at Dad's sites. Lisa has had a difficult existence. She had a stroke in the autumn. She survived since it was discovered in a timely manner. She is still undergoing rehabilitation in a care facility. Although she can now speak in a basic way, she still finds it difficult. She is still working on getting back to walking. She still has a long way to go. Her social circles have shown some sympathy for her health problems. Even the grandchildren of Mom, Tom and Dad have set aside their suffering to see her. I may never be a really philanthropic person. About the affair partner, I don't know a lot. He has vanished from my professional network. All I know is that a bankruptcy law firm did send an inquiry letter to the corporation. We haven't yet seen any formal filings. In terms of the business, it is profitable even without his financial support and direction. Every employee received a handsome bonus, and we controlled the debt. We are now closer because of Dad's last presence and his kind writings. By continuing to live on the farm and treasure the memories Dad left us, we continue to uphold his legacy. Every sunrise and sunset we witness from his favorite locations reflects his influence. In the place he cherished, his soul endures. I appreciate everyone's help along the way. Am I the asshole for leaving after my partner stopped the pill and tampered with condoms to get pregnant against my will? Original post. My partner has been on the pill throughout our relationship and we've been in a bit of a battle these past few weeks over having children. I categorically said that I don't want them and started using condoms for double protection. This morning, she told me that she's pregnant and I asked how this could happen when we'd been so careful. She admitted to coming off the pill and piercing through the condoms that we have stored. I've said that I don't want this and that I'm not up for marrying into a relationship based on lies. She says she's keeping it and has already told her friends as according to her, she'd done the test 8 weeks ago and was keeping it quiet in the hopes that I'd change my mind. I have no idea what to do here. Help. I am in England and am 29. Update. Firstly, thanks so much for all your comments. I didn't expect this to blow up quite so much as it did. Secondly, I want to get a few things straight as people seem to be struggling with timelines. My partner and I were due to get married in a few short weeks. We have had many long and involved conversations during our relationship about us both wanting to remain a child-free family over the years that we have been together. Around 2-3 months ago, they started to appear to change their mind, which I feel insecure and unhappy about as it is not something that I want from life, which is why I'd booked a vasectomy through the NHS. I cannot afford to go private as money is very tight, again another reason I do not want children. She admitted to tampering with condoms and said that she'd come off the pill several weeks ago. At that point, prior to her saying that kids might be an option for her, we were still having sex and I was under the impression that we were protected as she was on the pill. I have made no secret about how I do not want kids and she is fully aware of my reasons behind that, which I do not have to share with strangers on the internet. She has shown me a test and it confirms that she is pregnant. I have asked that she get an abortion, she has refused and I feel the trust has gone completely from our relationship. We are now in the process of canceling the engagement, which she isn't happy with at all and has said that I'm ruining her life. Now, for those people telling me to go to therapy, man up or that I'm lying. It's great that you disagree with me, but I'd never tell you to attend therapy if your worldview differed to mine, that I should be at fault after my partner has lied to me, apparently for months, and that I'm a liar. Here's a few other things for you. No, I do not like kids and I don't like entitled parents. I see it the same as disliking dogs, cats or birds. That is my opinion. Not for everyone and not all people have to tolerate your madness. My disinterest and lack of care towards them is one of the many reasons why it would be idiotic for me to be a father. Those calling bullshit on the 21+ wedding venue thing are just wrong. It's a stipulation of the venue we chose, nothing more and nothing less. The plain thing happened several years ago. The smoking area fiasco occurred over a year ago. Colleagues bringing their newborns into work is a continued pain and just really gets my goat, just like some people don't like Susan to eat her tuna mayo baguette. It shows a complete and utter lack of etiquette and thought by parents who are coming out in their droves to tell me how wrong I am about their decision. We'll provide updates as and when I get through all the comments. Be kind, people. Update 2. I spoke to a lawyer earlier today who has advised that as we are not married that I won't automatically be added to the birth certificate. Woohoo. My ex-partner can still claim that I'm the biological father, but without my consent to a DNA test is unlikely to be able to prove it, unless it is ordered by the court, but as I've been coerced into this, my lawyer thinks ex-partner and family will back down as I have evidence. The lawyer advised that I don't waive my parental rights yet as it would indicate that I still believe the fetus could be mine. So I just have to bide my time and leave the country till this all blows over. The lawyer also suggested that I go self-employed but didn't divulge the specifics. My ex-partner has admitted to coming off birth control and piercing the condoms, which she said she'd done around 3 months ago, as she knew I was due a vasectomy early next week and thought I'd change my mind. She has refused to have an abortion, which is her right, and I've refused any involvement. Has anyone been through this before and managed not to pay out? I think I've got a pretty good case. Update 3. My ex-partner is going to keep the baby. She wants me to be involved in her life and says she doesn't want to lose me over something like this. A life-changing unwanted event? Yeah, sure, haha. I have said that I will be having nothing to do with this mistake and that all responsibility now lies with her and her family. She has been blocked from using any form of mobile communication with me and I have now been sent 3 letters by her to my parents' house. The last letter included a scan of the embryo and a note requesting that I submit a DNA sample. The scan has confirmed that she is 13-14 weeks pregnant. which means that she kept this hidden for a good chunk of time. She has said that she will not have an abortion as this is what she always wanted and that she will be taking me to court if I don't offer to help. The more time that goes on, the more she makes this an awful situation, the more I hate her. I refused the DNA test and sent her screenshots, on my lawyer's advice, of the conversation where she admitted to coming off the pill and piercing condoms in an attempt to get pregnant. She has now gone quiet, until this morning. She is pursuing legal action against me, my family, and is looking for a private arrangement of child support. The amount she wants for this bag of cells is triple the recommended amount via the government and is one of the reasons she is trying to get me to admit that it's my DNA in that embryo so that I can keep me. I have just lost my job. I have no savings. This is going to ruin me, my life, and the only way out that I can think of is just to run off a cliff and hope for the best. I hate this. Ada has no consensus bot. OOP received mixed reactions. Relevant comments. OOP on having the conversation with his partner about children. OOP. We did have that conversation. 8 years ago. She changed the rules. She and I agreed on no kids 8 years ago. She then lied about birth control and put holes in the condoms we used to have sex. How the fuck is that me causing a problem? You sound like a delightful chap. She was my partner, now she isn't. Also, dude, regardless of where we are in our relationship, there's always respect for the women, not girls, that I'm with. I would not call my partner my girlfriend, because I don't like the term. As I mentioned in my post, we had the conversation 8 years ago, and as I've mentioned in other posts asking for advice, we've always spoken about being a child-free couple. My point here, if you read it with your peepers focused on the words, is that she made the decision to go off birth control without telling me at some point, I don't know when. After disagreeing on children ahead of us getting married, I started to use condoms when we had sex under the impression that this would be double protection, when it was actually no protection at all. So in answer to your final quip, it's not gone very well, but I don't need someone like you to say this sort of mad shit. OOP on dealing with vasectomy. He had to have a legal reason for needing one. OOP, I have visited my GP for a referral 3 times, 24, 26 and 29. The first 2 times I was denied due to my age and the idea that I might change my mind. Average waiting time, they said, can be between 6-9 months, but I don't know if that's a deterrent for men as I was scheduled for my procedure 3 months after my approval. I am still going ahead with it. Update, October 16, 2024. Editor's note, edited out the first part of the update as it is a rehash of the original post. Update 4. My ex's parents have now got involved and have lumbered me with a court-ordered DNA test, or the option to lay child support and have no involvement. I have dug my heels in and said that everything she has done will constitute involvement from the police, and am trying to avoid legal battles as I have no money or means to support myself right now, let alone a child I never ever wanted. My parents are now asking me to reconsider my position, and I want to scream every time they bring it up as they're trying to find a positive, and have said it might be the best thing to ever happen to me, and it makes me physically sick every time I think about my life being ruined over someone else's deception. I cannot sleep. I cannot focus. I'm so scared. I have now had a vasectomy. I tried to fulfill my girlfriend's fantasy by buying a male sex doll, but it backfired. Now she enjoys it more than I do. My GF shared a role-play fantasy with me during the early stages of our relationship. By her own admission, she never expected our relationship to grow into something serious, so the purpose of her sharing this specific fantasy on one of our dates didn't feel like anything she wanted the two of us to actually do. It was a trivial topic between two people who didn't see a long-term future with each other and therefore felt comfortable discussing our absurd fantasies. This is how my GF explained her fantasy to me. She catches her supposedly straight BF fucking a male sex doll, which turns her on and prompts her to encourage him to continue fucking the doll while she watches and masturbates. No idea how I reacted at the time, but I always remembered my GF struggling to balance her embarrassment with her enthusiasm, which was wholesome as fuck and made me like her even more. I liked her so much that I wanted to keep seeing her, and thankfully the feeling was mutual. We eventually became GF and BF and life continued. My GF never referenced the gay sex doll fantasy again, even when we experimented with a variety of other role-play fantasies in the bedroom. I never forgot, and I figured it would be kind of cool to celebrate our 1-year anniversary by exploring the fantasy my GF shared with me when I was nothing more to her than a guy she just wanted to have fun with in her free time. I decided to keep it as a surprise and let my GF believe that our anniversary dinner was as special as things were going to get that night. But little did she know that I secretly made all the necessary arrangements to bring her homoerotic fantasy to life. The plan was simple. Go out for dinner. Come home. Cuddle on the couch. However, mid-cuddle, I would go to the bathroom, But that would be an act because I would not be going to the bathroom at all. I would instead beeline for the bedroom where I would get undressed and proceed to get things going with my male sex doll, which I ordered online weeks ago and managed to keep hidden until that moment. The idea being that my GF would begin to wonder where the fuck I was and then eventually find me balls deep inside the rubber butt of a lifelike sex toy. I was hoping that by the time my GF opened the bedroom door, I would have managed to get it up, get it in and somehow make it look like I'm not just fucking an inanimate object but the object of my deepest desire. Needless to say, I had to be hard to fuck the doll, which proved to be hard to do because, you know, it was a fucking doll. With a dick. Not exactly my type. I never even heard my GF approach my bedroom because I was too focused on forcing my penis to cooperate. As soon as the bedroom door swung open, my GF and I saw each other and both of us fucking froze. My GF covered her mouth with her hand and asked if I was gonna explain what the fuck was happening. I jokingly said she always wanted to be with a guy who was into fucking twink sex dolls up the ass. My GF laughed and said she had no idea what I was talking about, but she was keen to know more. I reminded her of the moment at the beginning of our relationship when she revealed that she fantasized about a role-play situation where she catches her BF fucking a male sex doll and then she ends up enjoying the show. My GF gradually stopped laughing and said she most definitely would have remembered something as specific as that. And yet, she struggled to remember anything like that ever being discussed between the two of us or anyone else. I said I remembered though. Hence the fuckable mannequin I was failing to fuck. My GF stopped saying she didn't remember what I was talking about and low-key switched to disagreeing with me that she ever shared a fantasy like that with anyone because she refused to believe it was something she would think of, let alone enjoy. I made it clear to her that I would never have purchased a male sex doll, much less go as far as to fuck the thing, if it wasn't for the fact that I remembered her talking about how hot that was for her. My GF asked if one of us was gaslighting the other or if maybe one of us, aka me, was feeling somewhat ashamed about what was going on in the room before she walked in. I said I was feeling frustrated that she was refusing to even entertain the idea that she might have had this fantasy and communicated it with me. My GF said maybe I was confusing her with an ex-GF who enjoyed watching straight guys doing gay stuff. I decided to shut up and get dressed because I didn't understand what was going on anymore. My GF inspected the sex doll while continuing to question me about this so-called fantasy of hers that she was convinced was in fact my fantasy. She wondered if it was just her that thought the sex doll kind of looked like my best friend. I kissed her and said happy anniversary before I reiterated that this was all for her. My GF asked if that meant she could use the sex doll too. I said since both my dick and my chick, I never actually said chick, are not into me using the doll, then I would have no use for it, so consider it an anniversary gift. My GF thanked me and said she appreciated how vulnerable I was willing to be in front of her, regardless of whose fantasy it was. It's been a month since the night of our anniversary and one thing has become apparent to me. My GF loves the sex doll. In fact, she's been fucking it more than she fucks me, but she denies it, which seems to be something she does a lot when it comes to the sex doll. I wish I could go back in time and tell past me to avoid buying a sex doll and save the money for a PS5 or some shit. TLDR bought a male sex doll, which I planned to have sex with in front of my GF, who once said she had a fantasy of watching her BF fuck a male sex doll. Realized I fucked up when A, I struggled to get hard, B, my GF denied ever having such a fantasy, thus making me look low-key gay, and C, my GF now enjoys fucking the sex doll more than she fucks me, which she denies too. Comments Firelight 3. Anyone going to talk about how she said she thought it looked like his best friend and now she wants to fuck it all the time? LOL OOP. It didn't go over my head. I just didn't take the bait. I knew the best friend comment was an attempt to make me feel even more awkward about trying to fuck a doll with a dick. That doll looks nothing like my best friend. If it did, then my best friend should audition for a role in Team America. Catter0223 I just want to know how far he went. Is it one of those novelty blow-up dolls they's more pool float than doll? Or did bro splurge on a $3,000 real doll? OOP I went for the closest thing to real as possible because I foolishly thought the blow-up version might end up being too comical and potentially take my GF out of the moment. But that happened anyway. Paid $2.199 for a model named Max, but the true cost appears to be my relationship. What is this a cantad dude? What are you even doing being in a relationship with someone like this? OOP This might come as a surprise based on my post, but excluding recent events, my GF made me happy. I detected no relationship ending red flags until now. I'm not sure what to call what's been happening to us since the sex doll situation, but she's beginning to show me a side to her that I didn't even know existed. My friend planted a seed in my head when I shared this story with him. He believes my GF wants to break up with me for whatever reason, and the sex doll unexpectedly became a possible exit strategy. Hence the gaslighting and the sex doll fucking. Rightmar 1423. She denies telling you about fantasy. Makes you feel awkward when you tried to do something special on your anniversary. Tells you the doll looks like your best friend, and on top of it all, she fucks it more than she does you. Something is off about here. And I think you need to have serious talk with your girlfriend before the seed your friends has planted into your head grows into doubts and resentfulness, and in the end destroying this relationship from the inside. Update. October 16, 2024. I made the mistake of purchasing a male sex doll for the purpose of fulfilling the homoerotic fantasy my GF pitched to me at the beginning of our relationship, which was that she fantasized about watching a guy fuck a male sex doll. I thought I was prepared to bring the fantasy to life, but I realized I fucked up when my GF walked in on me struggling to fuck the sex doll because I was unable to get hard, and then she informed me that she never had that fantasy, which convinced her that I must have misunderstood her or imagined the whole fucking thing. What happened for weeks afterwards was my GF sticking to the narrative that she never shared that fantasy with me, and then making the decision to fuck the sex doll since I no longer had any use for it. When I recently shared my story on Reddit, mods removed my original post. The comments were kind of split between my GF gaslighting me and me misremembering what she said. My GF and I basically agreed to disagree about the origin story of the fantasy and moved on. In an attempt to finally embrace the awkwardness of the situation, I decided to follow the advice of a few Redditors and proposed a threesome featuring me, my GF, and the sex doll she was apparently fucking. My GF laughed and said I was investing too much time thinking about the sex doll before telling me that she's actually never been intimate with the sex doll. She unexpectedly confessed that she was playfully planting seeds in my head to make me believe that she was fucking the sex doll because she didn't know what the fuck to make of the fantasy. I believed she came up with it. So instead of prolonging a fantasy that none of us were enjoying, she improvised and incorporated ingredients that she thought would spice things up, hence her month-long mindfuckery to make me feel like I'm competing in the bedroom against a humanoid sex toy. My GF and I had a long conversation about transparency. She said she appreciated that I was willing to be vulnerable for the purpose of pleasing her, but to avoid uncomfortable situations or misunderstandings, she encouraged me to rather inform her about things that involve fantasies and kinks, especially if I'm gonna end up spending money on expensive sex dolls. I apologized and also encouraged her to follow her own advice and keep me in the loop if she was gonna play mind games. As soon as my GF and I cleared the air, we were left wondering if a threesome with the sex doll was still something we wanted to do. I was leaning towards leaving the sex doll out of the bedroom and out of our lives forever, but my GF seemed keen to want to see me fucking the doll since that was apparently her fantasy according to me. So as a couple, we decided to fuck the sex doll together. And you know what? It fucking sucked. My GF, who had the sex doll in her possession, didn't tell me that her dog somehow managed to find the sex doll and eat parts of it. When I saw the doll in front of me, it had chunks of hair missing on its head, its top lip was ripped off, and both nipples were gone. It was the stuff of nightmares. My GF was very apologetic and quick to point out that everything below the waist was still in one piece, so it was still fuckable, but all I saw was the thousands that I regrettably spent on a realistic sex doll that now looked like Jim Carrey as Fire Marshal Bill. Anyway, so I butt-fucked Bill, but I was only able to get it up because my GF offered to give me a hand. It was the most shameful orgasm I've ever had. My GF had a hard time making eye contact with me afterwards without laughing. Worst sex I've ever had mixed with the worst money-making decision I've ever made. TLDR, coming back from my original post, which has been removed, my GF and I made peace and decided to fuck the sex doll together. The sex was absolutely terrible and the sex doll looked fucked up because my GF accidentally allowed her dog to destroy it. So, not only was the sex the absolute worst, but I literally fucked away thousands out of my bank account because I'm unable to return the sex doll now that it's been deformed. Comments Rush 2049. If this story is true, and it's odd enough that I think it actually could be, you need to seriously reconsider your relationship. This is way too much energy into mind games over something that was supposed to be a thoughtful gift for her. Then she didn't take care of the asset either, and instead of returning it, she destroyed it. Fucking weak-ass behavior in a partner, and this situation almost reads like she's getting a kick out of seeing you be embarrassed. You're not having sex for months. This story makes me think your girlfriend sucks. OP, I hate comparing my GF to my exes, but I can guarantee that most of my exes, if not all of them, would have buried the sex doll fantasy that night if this was some kind of misinterpretation from my side and not something they were into. None of them would have exploited my fuck up and low-key extended what was an obvious failed attempt on my end at being thoughtfully kinky. On the surface, There seems to be peace between me and my GF, but I have a feeling that the sex doll might have indirectly exposed the cracks in my relationship. Anyway, this is what I'm saying now. Tomorrow I might just feel like I was overthinking everything and regret this comment. JWatts 1973. The funniest part of the story is how you think a non-deformed sex doll is returnable. Am I the asshole for cutting ties with my family after years of being overshadowed by my disabled sister's needs and feeling invisible? Emily, my younger sister, has always been the center of my family's existence. Even though she is a year younger than me, it has always seemed to me like she lives in a completely different universe that is solely centered on her. Because Emily was born with a physical disability and ongoing health problems, her life was filled with doctor's appointments, treatments, and special accommodations. Naturally, my parents devoted nearly all of their time and energy to making her life as easy and happy as possible, and I could see why. Nevertheless, it also meant that I was abandoned at a very young age. I took on the role of the easy and healthy kid, which came with the expectation that I needed less care and upkeep. I learned early on not to worry about it because Emily's needs always came first. I would nearly always stay behind when Emily couldn't, either at Aunt Linda's or with a neighbor, depending on Emily's ability to cope. They would frequently say, "We will bring you next time." But I never felt like it would happen. I didn't simply miss the big family holidays. Emily was almost always at the center of even the small everyday activities, like going to the park, buying ice cream, or watching a movie with the family. Sometimes I could comprehend it logically, but it still hurts emotionally. Her needs always came first, even though I would be excited about the idea of us all doing something together. I felt unnoticeable. The first time I truly felt the weight of being forgotten was on one of my birthdays. I must have been 8 or 9 years old by then. There was no cake, no celebration, and no acknowledgement of the day. I woke up that morning with the thought that maybe, just possibly, something unexpected was in store for me. However, as the day went on, it became very evident that my parents had completely forgotten my birthday. Their main goal was to get Emily to a concert that she had been anticipating for several months. They talked enthusiastically about the performance when they got home. As I listened, I questioned if they were even aware that it was supposed to be my special day. It wasn't until the next morning that my mother realized her error. Even while I appreciated the gift card she hurriedly grabbed as an afterthought, it was painfully obvious that the excitement of Emily's concert far outweighed my birthday in their universe. For many years, this pattern persisted. My parents were constantly focusing on Emily, and I was expected to accept that. Being understanding at all times, avoiding conflict, and blending in while everyone else's needs were taken care of was a heavy burden for a young youngster. I felt more noticed and appreciated whether I was by myself or at friends' houses, so I started spending more time there. A year ago was my 10th birthday. For weeks, I had been hinting that I wanted to do something fun. Like go to the arcade or throw a pizza party. It was significant to me because I was finally getting close to double digits. As my birthday drew near, however, it became very evident that nothing was scheduled. I wanted them to surprise me, but I forced myself not to get excited. Maybe, just maybe, this year would be different. On the morning of my birthday, however, there was no celebration. There was no mention of it during breakfast, and the day went by like any other. Emily was the center of attention because she had been having a rough week with her health. Even though I knew she required more attention, I still felt disappointed. My school friends recalled, wished me a happy birthday, and even collected some money to buy me ice cream for lunch. It was a small thing, but it made the day seem less empty. I thought maybe my folks would remember when I got home that afternoon. However, the house was silent and my mother was on the phone setting up Emily's next therapy session. My father was still working. It should come as no surprise that no one acknowledged that today was supposed to be mine. Trying to make the most of it, I went to my room. What is the point of saying anything? It wouldn't make people remember, and it certainly wouldn't make them feel sorry. The following day my mother finally realized she had missed my birthday again. She apologized and explained how busy she had been with Emily. As usual, I nodded and claimed it was all right, but it wasn't. Even though I knew in my heart how things would work out, they assured me that we would make up for it that weekend. I desired to have faith in them. We stayed at home during the weekend though, because Emily wasn't feeling well enough to go out. Rather than celebrating or doing something special for Emily, we watched her favorite movies. As an afterthought, my dad brought home a store-bought cake, but by that point, it felt more like a consolation prize than a celebration. It served as yet another sobering reminder that in my home, Emily's needs and desires always came first. I had given up on having many dreams by the time I turned 12. I didn't focus on making any requests or offering any agenda suggestions. I spent the entire day playing video games, doing my homework, and helping out around the house. That year, my parents did remember to wish me a happy birthday, but there was a brief acknowledgement before everything was back to normal. That day, Emily went to see another doctor, and she was the center of attention again. That birthday hurt the most. Even though it wasn't particularly awful, not because of anything noteworthy, but rather because of how typical everything was. Habitual neglect as opposed to malicious neglect. My needs barely registered since my parents were so accustomed to giving Emily all of their attention. They neglected not just my birthdays but also my accomplishments in school, my hobbies, and the things I held dear. The acknowledgement was swiftly followed by dismissal. Resignation hardened by the disappointment. I stopped expecting something different as I grew older and realized that this was just the way things were. Celebrations of friends' birthdays began to act as a reminder of what might occur. At home, however, the story was consistently the same. As the years went by, I became accustomed to my invisibility. My parents constantly seemed to be somewhere else, so I learned to have modest expectations. It wasn't like they didn't care about me in their own way. Even though Emily's requests were always more urgent, more immediate, and somehow more important, I started to emotionally distance myself, not out of anger, but out of self-preservation. It was easier to be satisfied with coming in second, third, or not at all, and it was easier to not expect anything. During all of this, my grandparents were my lifeline. They were the ones that noticed the small details about me and gave me a sense of importance. Every time I went to their house, I had the impression that I had entered a different realm where I could see myself. Making everything unique was something my grandmother was particularly skilled at. Each time I went to see her, she let me pick out something to bake. No matter what we made, cookies, cupcakes, or even simple spaghetti, she had an old recipe book that was worn and battered. Her kitchen was our thing. My childhood was filled with joy on such afternoons. She made sure I understood that I was more than just another kid, I was her grandson. Grandpa, however, was the reserved type. Although he didn't say much, he was trustworthy and always present. He loved model trains. His basement was crammed with tracks, little houses and miniature scenery. I loved how he included me in something he enjoyed, not because I was a rail enthusiast. It was the only area where I didn't feel like an afterthought, and I spent hours down there with him. My grandparents complimented me on every small achievement I made that my parents didn't notice. After I scored my first soccer goal, Grandma prepared a special dinner and baked a cake. Grandpa even put the ball I used in the game in a small display in the living room. They made it feel like a huge deal in their place. Even though it was just a local soccer match, it was important to them because it was important to me. However, such pleasant things are always taken away by life. It was 3 years ago that Grandma fell unwell. It was a long fall, reflecting the slow erosion of my childhood happiness. It wasn't abrupt. She continued to attempt baking with me at first, but as her condition worsened, our sessions shifted to my sitting next to her bed and holding her hand as she slept. Long before she was gone, I missed her. Her death truly broke my heart. It felt like losing everything when I lost the one person who gave me a sense of belonging. The funeral went very quickly. There were many faces expressing sorrow, but it didn't feel genuine. Although Grandma was no longer with me, it felt more like a piece of me had. After that, Grandpa changed. His once warm eyes became aloof. Our visits decreased, and he stopped hanging around with his trains. What had been my sanctuary felt chilly and empty now. Because the house was too full of memories, Grandpa eventually went into a nursing home in a different city. I could understand why it was sold, but it still felt like another aspect of my youth had been lost. It wasn't the same when we went to see him once a month. The antiseptic visitor's room lacked the coziness that had previously made our time together memorable, and our visits were short. We were both unable to mend the raw wound caused by Grandma's absence. The barrier against the loneliness I experienced at home disappeared after Grandma left and Grandpa moved far away. Everything became controlled by Emily's needs, and life resumed as it had always been. The contrast, however, was suddenly even more noticeable. My grandparents made me visible where my parents had unintentionally rendered me invisible. It was absorbed by every family decision, every discussion, and every medical procedure Emily had. My words appeared to disappear as soon as they left my lips when I tried to discuss friends or school. They didn't appear to be picked up. I became more reclusive at home, and I typically declined friends' invitations to hang out at the university. It was easier to avoid queries about why I felt the need to pretend everything was all right or why I was always so miserable. Everyone was aware of Emily, of course, but nobody had any real idea what it was like to live in her shadow. Since Emily did not select her health problems, I felt ashamed, But that did not make the actual suffering of neglect any less genuine. Specifically, the guilt was awful. I felt terrible because I wanted more attention. And I was upset that Emily was constantly given priority. Feeling important was more important than merely getting attention. Despite my parents' best efforts, I still felt like I was peering in from the outside. At this point, I brought up family therapy for the first time, but I had no idea what to anticipate. I thought I'd give it a shot. My parents consented, much to my surprise. Maybe they thought a professional could assist close the growing distance between us, or maybe they didn't know what else to do. In any case, we were seated in a calm office with a therapist who appeared sincere in wanting to hear from each of us. We started going to therapy sessions on a regular basis. I was a little optimistic at first that things might get better. I was able to finally communicate what I had been experiencing for a long time early on in those sessions. I expressed my desire for them to take notice of my hobbies and recognize my achievements, as well as how it felt to be the one neglected. It had been a while since I felt as though my parents were actually paying attention or that they recognized the profound impact their deeds, or lack thereof, had on me. They appeared taken aback, possibly even shocked. Tears, apologies, and vows to improve were exchanged. For a few moments we appeared to be moving forward. My parents paid closer attention and were more considerate. They found time for me alone, for things that weren't Emily's purview. We went bowling, saw a movie, and visited a museum. Even though it was unpleasant at first, it felt great to be the center of attention for a brief while. But Emily was aware of the shift. Since she wasn't used to sharing the limelight, her jealousy quickly surfaced. Small remarks like how much fun we must have had without her or how wonderful it was for her to have some alone time at home were the first subtleties. However, those comments quickly became more. She sobbed throughout dinner one night, saying my parents were favoring me and ignoring her. According to her, the reason they loved me more was because I was normal. My parents were shocked by the accusation and hurried to console her. We started to lose the delicate equilibrium we had been establishing. We stopped going on family vacations as often, and when we did, Emily's jealousy took center stage. My parents went back to their old methods because they couldn't decide whether to include me or control Emily's emotions. It quickly became evident that I was only living in Emily's reality once more. I felt bad for disturbing things, so I proposed that we resume our regular routine. I decided that accepting my position on the sidelines would make things simpler for everyone. However, our therapist disapproved of that notion, reminding us that the purpose of treatment was to disrupt these negative habits rather than to strengthen them. Even though it seemed like we were going nowhere, we persisted. The majority of our sessions were dominated by Emily's sentiments of envy and abandonment. Even in therapy, which was meant to benefit all of us, she continued to take center stage. Despite my frustration, I failed to find a solution. One session reached a breaking point when Emily accused my parents of loving and preferring me more. My parents went into a self-doubting, guilt-ridden spiral after the accusation. The progress we had been making was compromised as they rushed to reassure her. It was tiring to see the same patterns being repeated over and over. I started to question whether going on with therapy was really necessary. I was so exhausted. I was simply exhausted and no longer upset. I'm tired of attempting to articulate how I feel and of holding out hope that things will improve. I began withdrawing once more, both from the treatment sessions and from my family. I started to lose the tiny hope I'd been holding on to, the hope that perhaps things could be different. That change occurred within me. I came to terms with the fact that this was the way life would be. Therapy had become just another ritual in which I expressed my emotions, only for Emily's desires and sentiments to take precedence over mine. My parents couldn't come see me since they were too involved in Emily's life. I accepted that information as true. I had lost my anger. I had exerted every effort to draw their attention to me and help them comprehend what it was like to be ignored. However, it was obvious that they were set in their ways, and I was out of energy to challenge it. I started to completely stop going to therapy. What use was it to repeat the same things over and over again if nothing was going to change? My parents were aware of my increasing distance, but they were unsure of how to respond. They seemed to be only going through the motions when they tried to interact with me. Whether they inquired about my day or made awkward attempts to strike up a conversation over dinner, there was no genuine connection. My withdrawal was also observed by Emily. She had a mixed response. On the one hand, she was glad that she was once again the center of attention. There were still a lot of questions, on the one hand. She started questioning me about trivial topics, such as my after-school activities and the games I was playing. She didn't know how to connect, and to be honest, I didn't either by this point. We were both unable to overcome the hurdles that had been put in place by years of mistrust and misunderstanding. I began focusing on my studies and personal hobbies. I made friends, joined groups, and concentrated on things that had nothing to do with home. It was comforting to be surrounded by people who knew Emily yet recognized me for more than just her sibling. I came to understand that I didn't need my family's approval by spending more time at school and with friends. I could establish my own personality without having to worry for my sister's demands. One day, during a particularly difficult therapy session, everything came to a head. I had been listening in silence as the therapist brought up Emily's sentiments of envy and desertion once more. She was always the focus. I had made an effort to speak up earlier in the session, describing how it felt to be repeatedly ignored. However, the topic quickly returned to Emily's difficulties. I was used to it at this point, yet it seemed different that day. Perhaps it was the years of frustration building up, or maybe it was the understanding that I had had enough. I paused the session after taking a deep breath. I told them everything. I had the impression that my family was looking straight through me. How I had given up on the idea that things would be different. How Emily's needs always came first and birthdays, accomplishments, and little moments had become meaningless. I described how agonizing it was to watch them defend the necessity of the current situation and how I had finally realized that nothing would change. The room was quiet after I was done. My parents were surprised, as if they were unaware of how deeply I was hurting. The harm was already done, even though the therapist made an effort to steer the discussion in a more constructive direction. My parents defended themselves rather than owning up to the damage they had caused me. They discussed how difficult it was to balance everything, how important Emily's health was and how they were trying their hardest. Emily joined in, saying I was attempting to make her feel awful over something she couldn't control. When she was the one dealing with actual difficulties, she accused me of being selfish for seeking attention. I wasn't surprised by what she said, even though it hurt. The hidden lesson that my feelings were not as significant as hers was one I had heard before. The therapist made an effort to diffuse the situation, but the damage had already been done. That's when I knew nothing would change. My parents were unable to see past Emily's needs, and Emily was only able to see her own difficulties. I never really succeeded in making room for myself, so I was caught in the center. For me, that session was a turning moment. I made the decision to stop trying to make things better. I kept being caught between Emily's and my own demands after that. Now though, I was simply worn out. I had lost my anger. Peace was what I desired. The conflict was no longer interesting. I became progressively more reclusive during the following few weeks. I concentrated on my studies, looking for internships, college scholarships, and any opportunity to travel far from home and be independent at last. I started searching for distant colleges where I could start over without having to worry about the dynamics of my family. I craved distance, both physically and emotionally, even though I loved my family. I rejected my parents' suggestion that we consult a different therapist to get a different viewpoint. I had given up on attempting to fix anything that was too damaged. Despite their apparent disappointment, they didn't press the issue, either because they were growing weary of the never-ending battle or because they were starting to realize that some wounds couldn't be healed. However, Emily didn't appear to notice that I was withdrawing. She was once again the center of attention, and she was perfectly content with it. Every now and again she would inquire about my plans, but our discussions never progressed past the obvious. I didn't see a way to close the distance between us now that we had drifted apart. I became more and more preoccupied about my future. I applied to colleges, went to college campuses, and put myself into getting ready for life beyond high school. My grades improved, my friendships grew stronger, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was making progress toward a personal goal. I was creating a life apart from Emily, my parents, and the never-ending cycle of letdown. In the end, I received acceptance to a college in a different state. I could travel home if necessary, but it was still distant enough for me to be independent. When I told my parents, they were pleased for me, but I also felt sad. They must have seen that this was my method of bidding farewell to the family dynamics that had continuously molded me. They made no effort to persuade me to remain nearer to home. Rather, they only sent me their best wishes and said they would come see me when they could. I felt as though a burden had been removed when I left home. The independence that came with living alone thrilled me. I moved into a tiny dorm room after packing my belongings. The initial weeks were peculiar. The silence and the lack of Emily's incessant demands were unfamiliar to me. However, I quickly adapted to my new existence. I joined groups, made new friends, and found that I liked having my own identity. I was able to be myself for the first time in years, not the forgotten sibling, not an afterthought, just me. It was freeing. I discovered that I didn't miss home as much as I had anticipated as the months went by. Even though I continued to communicate with my parents, The distance gave me the freedom to unwind and discover my identity without having to worry about family responsibilities. I became aware that the resentment I had harbored for so long was beginning to lessen when we spent time apart. I no longer had animosity toward Emily, and I was no longer upset with my parents. Even though I hadn't always appreciated their best efforts, I now realized that they had done the best they could. Learning to let go of my expectations brought me serenity. Life in college was enjoyable. I was surrounded by individuals who noticed me, paid attention to me, and gave me a sense of acceptance. These close companions turned into family. We commemorated accomplishments, birthdays, and even the minor triumphs that my family had frequently disregarded. I was no longer only an afterthought for the first time. Being a part of something was an incredible feeling. Even though I had discovered a new sense of belonging, I still missed my family. I stayed in touch, but we only had surface-level interactions. The deeper problems that had afflicted us for so long were never explored. Reopening old wounds was something I wasn't sure I was ready for. So, liberated from the shadow of my past, I carried on living my life and making it genuinely mine. It wasn't flawless, but it was sufficient. I had been looking for a place where I could just be myself all my life. I had finally located that location. With time, the distance between my family and I became more about emotional isolation than it was about geographic distance. I was finally starting my own life without the burden of my family's past. I wasn't just existing at college, I was thriving. For the first time, I felt appreciated and seen for who I was, not only for what other people at home had classified me as, and I made friends who truly liked me. I would still occasionally contact home, mostly out of duty, but those conversations always felt pointless. My parents would nod courteously when I told them about my friends or school, but it was always obvious that Emily was still very important to them emotionally. As soon as I brought up her name, the topic of conversation would go back to her most recent health information, difficulties she was facing, and how she was handling everything. When it felt that my life was merely a footnote in their world, it was hard to stay involved in such discussions. I couldn't fully give up on the possibility that things would change in the future though. I was depressed even though I had long since moved on from the grudge. There was still a secret longing for a family that would embrace me the way they did Emily. My parents would simply give me a quick phone call or a fast text message to mark milestones, holidays, and birthdays. I had given up on expecting anything more by that point. I rejoiced with my pals, who had become my real family. They were the ones who made me feel important, who remembered my birthday, and who were there for me when I needed them. During my last year of college, I made the decision to spend Christmas at home 1 year. Since I hadn't been there in a long time, I reasoned that perhaps enough time had gone by for things to feel different. Perhaps I had changed and matured enough to manage the dynamics that had before overwhelmed me. The house was the same when I got there, yet something felt different. Maybe I was the difference. Perhaps the area that had made me feel so small was now too small for me. My parents' cordial welcome gave me a fleeting optimism that this visit would be unique. However, the old patterns quickly reappeared. Once more, Emily was at the center of every discussion, her needs, her challenges, her accomplishments. I listened politely, but as the days passed, I noticed that I was emotionally withdrawing and reverting to the corner I had occupied for so long. It seemed as though I had never been gone. Christmas morning was the decisive moment. My folks hadn't remembered to buy me anything. There was nothing for me as we sat around the tree exchanging gifts, no name-branded item, no sign of appreciation. I saw Emily's happiness light up the room as she opened her presents. My parents valued her so highly that they were oblivious to my silent existence. My life had been fashioned by years of overlooked milestones, forgotten birthdays, and subtle neglect, all of which were brought back to me in that moment. This time, however, I experienced acceptance rather than rage or sadness. I had finally come to the point where I didn't require their approval or affirmation. I didn't need them to congratulate me because I had learned to do it on my own. I silently packed my belongings that night and departed early the next morning. There was no conflict, no spectacular departure. I was aware that I had at last reconciled with my childhood family. Knowing they wouldn't change, I just turned away. However, I realized that I no longer required their space. In a family that didn't know how to provide for me, I had spent years trying to find a place for myself. In the world I had created for myself, I had discovered that place somewhere. Life continued. I got a job in a distant place after graduating with honors from college. It was everything I had ever wanted. A new beginning, a clean slate, unencumbered by my family's past, and the freedom to become who I truly wanted to be. For the first time, I felt genuinely pleased with what I had achieved, and my friends joined me in celebrating by throwing a party in my honor. I became acutely aware that my happiness was independent of my family after spending time apart from them. We never delved into the underlying concerns that had created our relationship. Instead, our interactions remained superficial when I periodically visited home. And that was all right. I had given up attempting to alter the fact that Emily would always come first for my parents. As the years passed, my life kept changing in unforeseen ways. I created a life that felt completely unique, surrounded myself with people who appreciated me, and got a job I enjoyed. I had discovered how to be happy without looking to my parents for attention or praise. I still occasionally think about my family, including Emily and her life to this day, as well as my parents, who still focus on her. I'm curious whether they ever consider me. If they ever consider what they missed or how things ended. I don't think about it though. I've moved on and accepted that things will always be difficult in my connection with them. In my opinion, a family is made up of everyone who supports you, accepts you for who you are, and loves you without conditions, not only your biological relatives. With more love and support than I ever imagined, my friends have grown to be like family. Though I've learned to love myself enough to let go of the desire for their approval, I will always adore my parents. The fact that I've created a happy life is ultimately what counts. I am incredibly thankful for the lessons I have learned, the strength I have acquired, and the person I have become as I sit here now and think back on the path that has led me to this point. I never lost myself, even though my family may have forgotten me in many ways. And that's what matters most of all, I've come to realize.